Recording in progress.
Okay, let's get to today's lecture then. Rules, there you are. Okay, so today's lecture is going to be a little bit early. Like everything I'm going to be talking to you about today isn't going to be stuff that we're going to be doing immediately. These are going to be things that we're going to be doing on Monday, right? It's going to be Monday's lab is essentially when we're going to be doing this. But let's talk about sprint planning and how we actually like put all of the things that we are working on in motion from the last lecture. Because the last lecture we talked about the product backlog and user stories and how to write those user stories and like making sure that everything's clear inside of them. Before I move on into the future of this, any questions that came up possibly from that on like from working on the product backlog between last lecture and now? Everyone's confident in what we're doing for that assignment and everything going all right with it?
I just about the Trello boards. Now the examples you sent us, are we supposed to be using those examples or making entirely new boards based off those examples?
You mean the ones that I invited you all to?
Yeah, the example.
I want you to be using that group, for the one that I invited you all to. I don't remember what the name of your group was, to say which one it was, but that came with like a product backlog board. Please use that product backlog board as the one that we're using. I know your team invited me to a board, but when I tried to join into that board, it was linked as private, and it was also only a single board instead of a workspace, which is why I'd be like, all right, I'm just going to create the workspace for you so it can like, just make sure we're going, right? I didn't want to have any slowdown on it. So please use that group board.
I appreciate that, honestly. Thank you.
All right, so let's talk about sprint planning today then, or I guess like how the Scrum process is actually managed on a day-to-day basis, more than just sprint planning. Sprint planning is part of it, right? That's going to be like the main thing we're going to be talking about, but it's more than just that as well. So first thing that happens when you're coming into, or when you're exiting out of pre-production, or when you're about to go into any major sprint, you have to first determine what the overall goal is of that upcoming sprint, or that upcoming development cycle that we're about to enter. Then you're going to grab user stories from that product backlog and move them into the sprint backlog for the, to be able to achieve those goals, like whatever those goals happen to be. Oh, no, not let me click. No, there it is. Okay. Once you have done that, then you're going to identify or evaluate how difficult you think those tasks are going to be, and then distribute the workload across the team so everyone knows what they're responsible for. And that takes us to planning poker. So planning poker is one thing that is not used everywhere. This is it's not a standard part of Scrum. It's not part of the original Scrum write-ups. If you go to like the actual the authors of the Scrum development methodology, it's not inside of their document, but it is a very common one that you'll see a lot of different places. And generally what this is for is here to prompt the conversation that should be happening, even if you're not using planning poker, right? Like the whole point is like it forces you to have the conversation. A lot of times teams don't even need to do this if they're communicating with each other well anyway, but it can definitely be helpful for teams that aren't. All right, so what planning poker is you go through that list of user stories that you had inside of your sprint backlog. You estimate the workload across them, you understand the dependencies between them, and you assign the tasks involved in them, right? So it's the same goals as sprint planning, right? It's the same thing that we're trying to do from the previous notes. It's just a more organized way of going about it. So the first step you go about on this is bidding on those user stories. So those user stories are read out to the team, and we answer any questions if there are any questions necessary to understand what it means to get done with that task. This means that we are going to then modify test cases where needed. Like if I read out the user story and we're just like, hey, what does this mean? We should be writing a new user story or a new test case or modifying the user story to make that more clear, right? So we don't have that as a question anymore. This also means that the client is generally part of this meeting, right? Or whoever is going to be the product owner, whoever is determining what our product is going to be, is part of this meeting to answer those questions for us, right? That is a significant, important aspect of it. It's not just the developers working amongst themselves. It is the actual product owner and the stakeholders that are going to be part of this question and answer and clarification process as well. Each team member will then identify how difficult they think it is to complete from the possible bids in front of themselves. This can be done with play cards to face down, or it can be done with web tools like planandpoker.com. Actually, here in my backpack, I have these cards. These are planning poker cards by Mountain Goat Software. These packs have been very beaten up over the years. Inside of the class, I need to buy some new ones. They're only like $3 or something like that. They're crazy cheap. They're not playing cards though. Not at least from the sense of like you couldn't play poker with them. But they are cards meant for this process. So it has like very different bids very different values inside of them. So you have like the infinity and 100 and question mark, like it's basically made specifically for this process. But the process isn't literally a game, right? The process is just like a conversation or like an organization of the conversation. All right, so these are the possible bids that we work with inside of the planning book process. You have 0, 1/2, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 20, 40, 100, unknown, and infinite. So a couple of things involved in this process. First, these are normally treated as abstract points. Right, so like you have 0 being the easiest thing that needs to be completed on the project, 100 being the hardest thing that needs to be completed on the project, and then the team just goes and comes to an understanding what a point means to them over the course of multiple sprints, so they can understand like this is about what a 5-point user story would be, this is about what an 8-point user story would be, and each team would be different on that. It is completely subjective. I have found it's very hard to actually get that to work inside of a classroom environment, right? You know, like it becomes a scenario where like you really need to have like 3 or 4 sprints with each other before you can get what that abstract value really means, right? Like what you're actually having inside of them. So like it doesn't really play out well inside of here, and that's the only reason I shift. So we will be estimating in hours, but I'll note that estimating in hours does come with some downsides. The biggest downside that is involved in estimating in hours is now you feel that these estimates have to be accurate, which estimates are always just best guesses. That's what an estimate is, right? You're not making a promise it'll be done inside of that time. You're just saying this is what I think it's going to take to get done, right? That's what I'm assuming is going to take to get done based on all the knowledge I have in place. And that is like why like estimating in general points can sometimes be helpful, because then it's to be like, well, I said there's a 5-hour user story. That doesn't mean I'm going to get it, or I'm a 5-point user story. That doesn't mean I'm going to get it done in 8 hours. It just means that's about where I thought it was going to be. But if you estimate, say, I'm going to take 5 hours on this, then you on yourself feel this has to take 5 hours because I estimated 5 hours. And your manager might feel, oh, you've been working on it for 5 hours. Why isn't it done yet? Both of those are kind of like bad scenarios you want to avoid. I'm not going to be that manager that's going to be looking over your shoulder and seeing like you've been working on this for 5 hours. Why is it not done yet? But please try to avoid your own side of that one as well, where you feel like these have to be overly accurate. They are only estimates. They are best guesses. You're trying to, come to an assumption on what you think is going to be from all the knowledge you have at the moment. So just try to avoid those downsides of estimating in hours as best as you possibly can. All right, so we're going to be doing those inside of the hour values instead. So 0 hour, 1 half hour, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours, 8 hours, 13 hours, 20 hours, 40 hours, 100 hours, unknown and infinite hours. All right, so the next thing involved in this is they reflect a pattern. Like if you're looking at the values that we have inside of here, you can see that it is basically like a logarithmic pattern. It's actually using the Fibonacci sequence, or a slightly modified version of the Fibonacci sequence. If you know what the Fibonacci sequence is, that's where you have, you start with 1 and 2, then you combine those 2 to get the next value to get 3, then you combine 2 and 3 to get 5, then you combine 3 and 5 to get 8, and then you combine 5 and 8 to get 13, right? You're like, that's the Fibonacci sequence. So like it is a modification of the Fibonacci sequence with a couple like notable notes. Like 0 and half weren't part of the Fibonacci sequence, but it seemed relevant to have those inside of there when estimating in hours. And then also this would be 21 at that point if we were actually continuing with the Fibonacci sequence. And the only reason it's not 21 is because too many times people were having conversations with their development manager or whoever is running the budget and being like, oh, why is this a 21 hour or 21 point bid? Why not 20? What was the extra hour coming from? And basically to avoid that conversation happening over and over again, they dropped the 1, right? Just to make it be like, all right, here, we'll get rid of this because you don't know the Fibonacci sequence, so you're just running into issues on here. Let's just get rid of it then. We'll just not pay attention to that aspect. So they moved it into more what like the business person could understand, where it'd be like a half a week, full week, and then like a week and a half, right? So actually it's like not a week and a half, it's like 2.5 weeks is what we're looking at inside of there for the 100 point. All right, the other thing you want to be paying attention inside of these, which is again something on why it should be estimated in points rather than hours, but we can still keep in mind with hours as well, is estimate these as if they are buckets, not absolute values. Right, so I don't want you to be thinking about like, I think this will take me exactly 9 hours to get done. I don't care about that. Like, that's not what we're doing when we're making estimates. We're just making best guesses. So what I want you to be thinking is just go up inside of these buckets. Be like, can I get it done in 1? No. Can I get 2? No. 3? No. 5? No. 8? Probably not. That seems a little bit too tight. 13? Yeah, I could get it done in 13 hours. It's a 13-hour bid, right? You're just going into that value. It basically has an automatic round up, and it's also trying to avoid that feeling of these have to be 100% accurate bids, right? You know, like that is not, you're making a literal time log on it. You're just making what you think it's going to fit inside of. So this is going to automatically do that process of going up to the next value for you. So please try to avoid that temptation of, I think it's going to take 5 hours to get done, which means I'm going to bid at 8. You'd be like, well, I mean, we already have rounding into the system, right? You just go ahead and go into the, like, whatever bucket you think it fits in. And if it does fit in that bucket, stick with that bucket. Some things will go high, some things will go low. That's normal. That's just part of the process. Special bids involved in this process. You have the 0-hour bid. All right, so 0-hour bids or 0-hour user stories are essentially user stories that exist just to force someone to do a thing that has almost no work involved in it. So my favorite example of this one happens on almost every game that comes into this class. And that is just going into the Unity project settings and changing the name of the project to be the name of the game. Because right now the name of the project is probably something like PP2 Dev Product or something like that, right? And if that's what the name of the project is inside of the Unity settings right now, when you export out your build, that's what the window will be called. That's what the registry entries will be called. That's what the product will be called. You know, like, that's what's going to be called all over the place. How long is it going to take someone to just open up the project settings and type in the name of the project in that text box? 15 seconds, right? You're like, it's not going to be a big thing that needs to be done at all, but someone still needs to do it, right? We still need to actually make sure it actually gets done. Because if we don't actually assign it, we don't have a card for it that says this person's going to get it done, you can go multiple sprints without it actually getting changed. And then you could be already on your launch candidate and realize, oh my God, we still haven't changed the name of our game inside of our settings. Sometimes games get fully published with the game still not being modified, and then that's one of the things they have to patch in, is be like, oh my God, our game is still just called like generic project or something like that on launch. We're going to want to actually shift the name of that project. So that's what a 0-hour bid is, right? You're like, it's not any real amount of work, but still something you have to assign to someone because you need to make sure it actually gets done. Next, you have the unknown bid. That is the question mark if you're using the cards. Unknown means there's not enough information to be able to make a bid. So this is one that actually kind of comes up before you even go into making your estimations. This is like after I read out the user story and you have a question, you should be raising that card immediately, right? To be like, I need to have this one answered to know what's going on here. I can't make a bid unless you can answer this question for me. So for an example of this one that happens in this class very frequently, it is like, I'm going to have the boss for level 3. And inside of the test cases for the boss for level 3, it has the test case of does the boss function correctly? And I'm just going to be in there and be like, what does correctly mean? Like, I can't put an estimate on this unless I know what this means, right? What it means to be done with this task. This could be a half-hour task. It could be 20 hours. It could be 100 hours. I don't know what you mean by completely, right? So we need to define that more thoroughly. This basically means we cannot assign it until that or that question gets answered first, right? I need to know what the answer to that question is before I can make a bid. And if it's not possible to answer that question, that means that we probably want to take this user story and put it back in the product backlog until we can answer that question, right? Whatever that question happened to be. Like we're just not ready to assign it yet at that point. We need to do more work on pre-production on that task before we can actually assign it to anyone. A significant note for us inside of this class though, since you are the people defining the goals of your task and your own user stories, if you end up having any of these questions that are a question mark, it's also your responsibility to go back in there and fill that in, right? To go figure out what that thing is and what it means to get that task actually done. Next, you have the infinite user story. So infinite is kind of interesting because it is a bit you can put on a user story, but it essentially says this cannot be done, but for a completely different reason than the question mark does. The infinite user story is I completely understand what you're asking of me. It's just beyond the scope of this project. It's just beyond what we can actually get done in the time frames allotted to us. So this is where you have a client that just has like these grandiose ideas. Like he was just like, he saw the Ready Player One movie and he was like, saw that haptic feedback suit and like how you could actually feel the fingertips of the other people while you're inside of the VR scene. He was just like, I want to know how long it's going to take you to add that to my game. Be like, cool, yeah, like 5 years in a research grant maybe, right? You're like, that's technology that doesn't exist right now, right? I can't actually do that for you in this case. But that's basically the point of an infinite user story. It is just so far beyond the scope of what we can get done, or it's beyond the scale of what you could completely, you know, like it's so far beyond like the work we could get done, like 100 hours isn't even accurate, right? So this would be like a user story for like, how long will it take you to add all of network play? Be like, yeah, that might as well be infinite with it defined that way, right? You're like, I need that broken down into smaller chunks that can actually be assigned. Because right now, that's beyond the scale, right? You broke off of what we can actually get done. So like, that should never happen. Hopefully, But in the business case, it happens fairly frequently, unfortunately, where you have your client is just like, I want to have this thing, be like, all right, you need to more thoroughly define that thing before I can even start working on that for you. All right. So why do we do this process? Why do we even bother with these cards and discussing these things, but like picking your bids, putting on the table face down, waiting for everyone else to make their bids? You're like, why do we do this whole process? It's basically to make sure that we actually think about the user stories. That's really all it is, right? You're like, the whole point of this exercise isn't like, the actual like methodology itself isn't the important part. The important part is the conversation and the understanding. And this forces the conversation and the understanding. I think that's the only reason people actually do it. Because it forces people to actually think about the user story to a point where they can make an estimate on it. So I have a place to defend. I know why I made my estimation of why I made that, like on that user story, like what was in my mind when I thought this was going to be a thing. It's not just going to be like I bid a 40 because I don't know, it just seemed big. You're like, well, could you give us any more definition than that, right? Like, why did you bid the 40 beyond that? Like, what is the work that you're trying to get done inside of there? You should give it some thought beyond just like, I don't know, seem big, right? You're like, you want to make sure you understand where the task is going to be at. It also helps avoid groupthink inside of this process. Groupthink basically happens when you have one person on the team or multiple people on the team that are like far more experienced than the other people on the team, right? You have Bob on the team who's been at the company for 20 years and he's been doing this job forever. And Bob put down a 3. And I'm just like, oh, well, then it has to be 3, right? You're like, I know that like Bob knows what he's talking about. So that means like, I'm just going to put that in there automatically. Bob can be wrong. Right? It can easily be a scenario where like there might be a piece of information that Bob does not have. And by forcing everyone to make their own bids in secret first and put them down on the table face down, it forces, it can bring some of that conversation up. Because then you can come up and be like, all right, I said, like Bob said it was a 3, but I said it was a 13. And Bob goes to me and be like, why 13? Why are you going to spend so much time on it? Be like, well, this is like file IO, and like I understand that you can do serialized fields, but we're also using WebGL. And because we're doing WebGL, we can't actually just do a binary serializer because you can't save binary files from WebGL. Right, so that means we're going to have to do a different functionality for that. I'm not really sure which functionality we're going to work with that. And Bob could be like, yeah, you know what? I wasn't actually thinking of WebGL on this at all. I was just thinking about serializing those objects, and yeah, that would take me a half hour, and everything else was the work. This is going to take longer. And then you might have another person on the team to be like, oh yeah, you can't serialize fields, but you can use the Unity player preps functionality. You just write off the player preps. It's cross-platform, works without anything you needed to do, right? You're like, all right, yeah, we could go that direction instead, right? It forces that conversation to happen, right? And I do heavily suggest people use player preps for their save and load because it is dirt easy. Like there are upsides and downsides to using player preps for save and load. The way that player preps works, it is a dictionary class. You guys remember the dictionary class from data structures, where you have like your key and value pair attached to each other. The way that the player preps works is that same key and value pair. You give it a string for the name of the variable and then the type of variable. So you say like set float player health, and then you pass in the float for the player health, and it will write that off into a location. You can get it back later. And then when you go back to the player preps, be like, hey, player preps, give me player health. And then it'll return that float to you that you saved earlier. And it's cross-platform, works across multiple runs of the executable. Inside of PC, it saves to the registry. Inside of WebGL, it saves off to your web database, right? Like it saves to good locations and on all platforms. It's an awesome system. The biggest downside is it has an 8 megabyte cap. You can't put more than 8 megabytes of information inside of it, which sounds like that's not much at all, right? It sounds like we're going to run out of that very, very quickly. 8 megabytes of floats and strings is a lot of information, actually. Like you can save more than you're going to need for your project. This means like it's not usable for something that's doing like persistent world saving. Like you're not going to save off like Grand Theft Auto using player preps, right? Like that file save will get too large. But you can easily save off like what level you're on, what health you're on, what's inside of your inventory. You're not going to run out of that space very quickly at all. So heavily suggest using that. You don't have to use it, but it's definitely a suggestion of that.
Is that what happened to Cyberpunk? There was like a thing where you couldn't save if something was like, if you did too much in the world, you couldn't save. Because it was like crash everything and you lose everything.
For which game? Cyberpunk? No, Cyberpunk wouldn't have been using that for saving. Cyberpunk first, like they're not using Unity. Whose engine was Cyberpunk using? Was it Unreal? I don't know if they're using Unreal or not, or if they're using their own internal engine. I think it's their own internal engine. Yeah, CD Projekt Red seems like the type of company that would still roll their own engine, whereas like most companies don't at this point. But yeah, like I don't think that it was that, but it could have been something similar to that. I know that there was like when we're talking about like bugs that can happen with file save and load, there was a bug that was kind of rough in was it Grand Theft Auto 3, I think it was. I'm not sure. Maybe it's Vice City. I don't remember which one it was. But because they have the persistent role saving, like you drinking energy drink, drop the can on the ground, hit save, turn off your computer, turn off your PlayStation, turn it back on, and the Coke can is still on the ground or your energy drink can is still on the ground. If you do that with like 500 cans, you can break the game, right? Like you can actually like crash the system or break the save file. I don't know how many people are going to drop 500 cans at their feet, but it was a thing that could break their save file because it had to save that to the persistent data and like just extended beyond the mem-alloc that they were allowed to have. So like it's probably something like that, right? It's probably something like it just went beyond what they could actually get done inside of whatever their memory allocations were for their file saves.
Cyberpunk pretty much had to save in short spurts. If you did too much in the game, it was too much of a file size to save and it would crash it.
So
But
like,
it first came out.
Oh, interesting.
It wasn't like cumulative.
So it depended on how long it was from the last save.
Pretty much.
On when it would
was
break?
saving too many things at once.
Does Cyberpunk have like a history feature where you can like rewind history or something like that to like? I'm trying to think of like why save files would get bigger the longer you are from your last save. And that's one of the reasons.
There is a feature in Cyberpunk when it's like a side, it's like part of the story, but you can control time in a way. You go back in time.
It might be something about it. Like it's hard to determine what it would be that would cause that. But like again, if you could rewind time, I could see that causing issues because that rewinding time is a feature that can sometimes be very difficult to implement. Like the base aspect of it, of just like controlling, like you just save off each object's transform every third of a second and then alert between them to rewind time. Like that part's not that hard. But then saving like what AI state they were in, what they had in their inventory, what they had in or what they were doing at that moment. Like that's where things get really more obnoxious with rewinding time. So I could easily see that causing issues if they were doing that. But I'm really surprised that. I guess I'm not really that surprised. I was gonna say I'm really surprised that a big game like that would have that big of an issue with save and load. But that game had issues with everything else.
Yeah, my
So
own guess is that save and load was like the last thing they did. They were like, all right, throw something in there, make it work good. As
Yeah.
long as it works.
All right, well, let's move on there. So it helps us avoid groupthink, helps us understand the user story a little bit better. No, let me click again. Come on. There we go. And it also makes sure that we maintain communication visibility, which is another big reason for the planning poker process, rather than just having people put their own estimates on their cards. Because this forces not just the person that's going to be assigned to the task to understand the task, it also forces everyone else on the team to understand what it means to get that task done. So you can not be in each other's way, right? So you can work with each other in a little bit more cohesive way. That way we know that all right, I can see exactly what Tim is going to be doing in level 1. And when we have our level 1 scene, and I know what I'm going to be doing in level 1, I know that I'm going to have to talk to Tim to make sure we're not causing any conflicts in each other's section, right? To be like, hey, are you currently working on the level geometry right now? Because I need to modify the level geometry. You are, cool. Let me know when you're done with that so I can work on that later, right? Like it'll help you at least have those conversations and understand each other's work a little bit more, just by having these conversations to understand each other's tasks. All right, once we have gone through that step though, where we had every user story estimated and we put our bids together, then we come to the negotiation or the valuation on them to understand what is the correct value for this for our team, right? Discuss why did our bids differ for one reason or another. You bid a 3, you bid a 13, what's the difference between you two? Why was this one an issue? Sometimes it could be like a knowledge information. It could be just something to be like, this person had knowledge that person did it, and we're just going to communicate that to each other. Other times it could just legitimately be personal experience. That can be a legitimate reason on this one as well. It could be like, all right, adding a death animation to the game. I'll get that done for you in a half hour. This other person on the team be like, I don't know, 5 hours? I never used the Unity animation system. They're like, that's accurate, right? That is a completely accurate scenario at that point. I've used the Unity animation system. They have it. It would take them 5 times as long than me to get that one done, right? That makes sense. So sometimes that is a legitimate scenario in this one as well. And at that point, the bid goes to whoever you're giving the user story to, right? Because if it's still that person that needs to do the death animation, we would need to put a 5 on it, right? Because that's how long it's going to take that person to get it done. It wouldn't make any sense for me to put my bid on and be like, oh, I can get it done in a half hour. That means that you should be able to get it done in a half hour as well. That's not accurate. That's not true. That's not the reality of it. In fact, this is one of the big benefits that Agile development has of having the developers themselves be part of that estimation process, because it avoids that scenario of your manager just coming to your desk one day and be like, here's a stack of to-dos, get it done for me by the end of the week, without you being part of that understanding of, is that a thing that can even be done in a week, right? Is that a thing that can be done inside of this time, right? So this is the developers actually having a voice in the process, which in a lot of other methodologies or a lot of different scenarios, you are just not really allowed to have. Again, going into one of those like Scrum and name only scenarios though, because I've definitely seen people that say like, we're using Scrum, and then they have the development manager put all the assignments and estimations together for everyone. Be like, no, you're not. You're using waterfall with extra steps, right? You're putting more inside of there, right? Because the developers have to be part of that conversation for this to actually give you any value. All right, after that, you go through that allocation, you determine who's responsible for each task, make sure that each user story has someone committed to getting that inside of the build, and we know that that person will get it done when we're done with this process. So they should be the best, or hopefully will be the person that's best equipped to tackle the user story, but no matter what, it's going to be the person responsible for trying to get that in by the end of the sprint. Once you've done that for every user story, then we want to make sure we're going to balance out our workload. First aspect of this is just balancing it out across team members, right? We don't want to have one person on the team have like, I have 60 hours worth of work to do, and this other person on the team over here who has 10 hours worth of work to do. Yeah, the person with 60 hours needs to give some of those tasks to the person with 10, right? We need to make sure we have a reasonable balance across people, that we're not overloading one person and under assigning another person. Everyone should have a reasonable amount of work to get done during the process. But also, actually, and probably more commonly involved in this process, make sure that the workload actually matches up with the sprint length. We don't want to have it set up where we can understand, like, we have more work to do on this sprint than we have time during this sprint, right? We know that, like, from previous sprints, we can see that we were usually able to get done like 150 points worth of user stories. And when we estimated our sprint backlog for this sprint, we can see that we have 200 points of user stories. We just know from our team history, this is like a quarter too much, right? We have too much work to get done during this time. We can't get all these tasks done. We need to put 50 points of each user stories back, right? We can't get all those done, or we need to discuss with our client to be like, which inside of here is the most critical features? Like, what are the things inside of here that are negotiable for our current sprint goals? Or what are the things that are less priority than the other things inside of there? So we can understand what to put back to the sprint backlog. Or maybe you end up having a scenario where the client or your product owner or your just manager determines, no, none of it's negotiable. We have to get all of it in by the end of this week, or by the end of this sprint. It's just like 100% emphatic point. We have to complete all these things before the end of this. Well, at that point, the conversation is changing. Now the conversation is changing to, all right, we're crunching that. How many hours are we working every day? How are we going to manage this process? How are we going to get out of this without ourselves dying by the end of this process, right? Because you know that's going to be a case that you're in at that point, right? You know that you're already working overtime on this. How are we going to mitigate the issues that are going to be part of that process? And I'll go into more about crunch mode in the industry and the game industry quality of life later in today's lecture. But this is part of that conversation, right? This is where the developer team can actually bring that up and have some sort of defense involved in that process, because you're saying this is going to take more time than we literally have time on the clock to be able to do. It could also be the other side of the coin on this one as well, though, where you're done with your estimation, you're done with your sprint planning, and you can see that, like, we know we can get 150 points of user stories done every sprint, and we're done with our sprint backlog estimations, and we're only at 120 points. Hey, let's look at the product backlog for any cool to have features, right? You're like, well, let's just add other things to the game. They'll make your game better, right? I can start adding Easter eggs into my game, and I can add big head mode to the game, right? You can do all these like other things that we didn't know we'd had budget for, because apparently we have the budget for it, right? We have it put in place, so we can make a better game from this. So you just make sure that it matches up. I'm not wanting you to overload yourself. You're just supposed to have a reasonable look, right? You just make sure that everyone who's involved in this, that you'll have about as much to get done as you can get done during this time. All right, important note during this process though, especially for agile development, this is where commitment comes into play, right? Like the product backlog has no commitment, right? You're not making a commitment for things happening in the game by being in the product backlog. Once you put things into the sprint backlog, you estimate it, assign it, and then the sprint plan has been approved by all stakeholders. Now we have made a commitment to getting that inside of the product. Right, and we made a commitment to getting that in the product in the way that we said we were going to get it inside of that product, which means if things need to change, those should be things that we're putting back into the product backlog for changing in the future, not things we're changing to our current sprint plan. The current sprint plan should be locked in place once we have finished that current sprint plan, or once everyone has agreed upon that process. So that change happens external to that. If for some reason this sprint plan becomes completely untainable, right? Just for whatever reason, what we planned during this sprint is just not possible to get done during this sprint. you cancel the sprint, right? You just completely throw out the sprint, put everything back in the product backlog and start it over, right? That is the solution at that point. It's not just to change things on the fly, it's to go back to the organization and step back and reevaluate, right? So that's what we're doing during our class. That's what you're going to run inside of the industry as well. You get it done the way that you defined it inside of there, and then you determine if anything needs to change after that fact. Don't want to spin your wheels on this process though. Generally for a 1 week sprint, this takes a team probably about 2 hours to do sprint plan. It shouldn't be a crazy amount of time that it takes you to get this one done, but like it is still a significant meeting that has to happen across teams. So important notes on this one though, if it does take you longer than 2 hours, the reasons why are usually either your product backlog is just missing user stories, right? So you're having to write them on the fly. And you're like, well, yeah, that's going to take a lot longer than if you're having to write the user stories at that moment rather than just estimating existing user stories. Or the clarity in the test case is just very unclear. So you have to write the clarity at that moment, or you're unclear on the sprint goals themselves. That would be a problem involved here. Or a biggest one inside of here, inadequately researched technology. Like if you're going to be having user stories for like the Unity animation system, and then you go to or using the Unity animation system, and then you have like the player animation user story in your hands, and everyone's making estimates, and everyone on the team is just like, I don't know, it's a question mark, right? Like I've never done anything in animations. Well, then you've kind of shown a flag to be like, that's the thing you all missed during pre-production, right? Because you should do some research on those things. So I'm not saying you should be an expert in it by the end of pre-production, but you should at least have a base understanding of the technology your game is going to be working around, right? So if you're going to have animations in your game, have someone on the team sit down and do a very brief animation tutorial, right? Like, I'm not expecting anything huge. Like, just spend 15 minutes looking up the animation system and looking at a couple videos, so you get a guess at least of how long it's going to take you to get that done, right? So you can make an educated guess on that process. That's really where you want to be by the end of pre-production. So like all of that stuff is done, it's out of your way. So when we're done, when we move into production, we're just estimating user stories and working, right? We're just going forward at that. The other reason this might take too long is if you're diving into too much minutia, right? If the discussion on the user story is going like far into the tech or far into the organization or how things should be done inside of it, and it's not necessary to have that conversation during this meeting. Like going back to that previous example, where like, are we going to do our file save in a binary file or with player prefs? Right, like if we're going to have that, if we start going into that discussion and we're talking about what type of variables each save value should use inside of our save system and what order they should be saved inside of so we can load them incorrectly, we dove way too much into minutia of that user story, because that's not going to change the estimation of the task. It might be a relevant conversation to have on how to implement it, but it's not a relevant conversation for everyone on the team to be part of, right? It's only the people that need to be part of that are the people making that feature at that point, right? Everyone else just needs to know, oh, you're going to be using this technology to do that? All right, I understand that from a base point of view. You can go forward at that point. So that conversation should happen afterwards, essentially, right? Like, don't waste the team's time for a one-on-one conversation when that can happen one-on-one. All right. So this should just be selecting user stories from the product backlog, discussing the goals on how we're going to define the tasks, estimating out the workload to complete those tasks, assigning the owners for that, and then balance out the workload across to the team. If you notice yourself spending a significant amount of time on sprint planning on things other than that, you're kind of wasting your time during sprint planning. Hopefully that's not going to be the case. Hopefully everyone's product backlog will be put together very solid and very well before we get to this point that this won't be an issue. All right, so the tools we're going to be using in our class to do these things. First, playing poker tools. There's a couple options for you, right? For my campus teams, you can borrow these cards if you want to use these cards. I have no problem. That's why they're so beat up, because I've loaned them out to so many students, right? So like you can take them if you'd like. You could use those cards. You could use player face cards as well, like just regular poker cards. It's a little bit, like you have to do a little bit of translation to do these though, then, right? Because like you have the 1, 2, 5, 8. But 8, but then you don't have a 13, so I guess that's the 13, and then that's the 20, and that's the 40, right? So you can do it, but it's a little bit more obnoxious to do it that way. You can do it that way. One of my preferred tools for playing poker, actually, why does it say 2 preferred tools for playing poker on that? Because it's really just that one. Planetpoker.com actually is a very good link on where you can have a digital tool for doing planning poker online. It really works like fairly well, and the main reason I like this one over a lot of other ones is because it maintains that anonymity when you're making your bids. And a lot of the tools that I see out there, like there's like a Trello plugin or a Trello power up that will add planning poker to Trello. But what it doesn't do is keep the bid secret until everyone makes their bids. So you go into the card and you see what everyone else has already bidded when you're making your bids and be like, well, that kind of defeats the purpose, right? You're not actually getting the conversation at that point. Now you've just gone straight back to whoever bid first is leading everyone else's estimations, right? That's not gonna necessarily work. So like this is a very good one involving that. I like this one a lot. So what we're gonna use in today's lecture or example when we go through the example today. And then Trello. Trello obviously going to be part of this process. What you're going to do for sprint planning is you're going to go into your product backlog and select every user story that needs to be done to complete the sprint goals and move those into your sprint backlog on your upcoming sprint, right? So you move it into, I guess this is saying first playable sprint. We don't have a first playable sprint. We're going straight to alpha. So like we were moving into the alpha board, into the sprint backlog. We're working, right? We're going at that point forward from side of that. So you're moving from the product backlog to the sprint board to confirm that that is a task owned by this sprint. Then go through every one of those user stories, doing that planning poker process, and you're going to enter in the estimations using the card size power up. This is already true and it already exists inside of everyone's boards. You don't have to add anything to the Trello interface to do this. It's just going to be there for you. You click on this little card size button and it'll open up for you what the size of the card, what the time spent on the card is, and what time remaining is. Size is your estimate, right? So when you're putting in your estimates, to be like, I think it's a 13-point user story, type in 13 points or 13 inside of size, hit save. You have saved that this is a 13-point user story. Then when you're working on it later, you just type in however long you spent working on that user story, right? So you just add it inside of there. Be like, all right, it's 30-point user story. It took me 8 hours to get done. Cool, awesome. That's fine. Or it was a 5-point user story. It took me 20 hours to get done. Cool, also awesome. I mean, I guess maybe not awesome in that case because it took you longer and that may be stressing you out. But there's no downside from it. Like I'm not going to punish you about it. I'm not going to. Your grade isn't going to go down from it. But you've logged the time on how long it's going to take you to get that done. So yeah, I guess awesome's the wrong word. Just not negative. Like try not think about negative in itself on things going over time. All right, so that's our process through sprint planning. Let's go through a class example for sprint planning now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Trello. And I'm going to go to that product backlog example user stories that we wrote last class, as well as a couple others. And we can do a class example of planning poker. Templates, go to the boards, go to the product backlog is where I created it. I archived them so I could make your boards and unarchive them. There you go. Grappling hook, restore that one. And opening doors. Was opening the doors the other one? That must have been the other one.
We did one for open doors.
Yeah. Store that one as well. Okay. Gonna grab these two. I'm gonna move these over to our sprint board. So I'm gonna move them over. Not into mechanics. Gonna go here. Yours will have much less inside of this drop down. Mine is only this long because it shows every board on every workspace you're part of. And right now I'm in like 30 workspaces, which is why this scroll is so long. You will only see the one, hopefully. So you're not going to see it like have to scroll past a whole bunch. I'll move this on my alpha sprint board into the sprint backlog list. Move that there. I'm going to do that one with this one as well to show that this is another user story we're going to get done during the sprint. There we are, alpha sprint into the sprint backlog. Moved it there. Then I'm also going to grab a couple other user stories for class example purposes. Let me copy this one. I'm going to copy this one over. And you won't be copying. I'm only copying so I don't mess up my templates. You're just going to be moving things every time you do it. Forward, up sprint, sprint backlog, copy that one there. Let's also do changing the options in the game. That one's always a good conversation. Copy that one over as well. Sprint backlog. Any other that we'd want to focus on? I think those are the main ones. And let me go to the game dev user story repository and grab a random card or a random feature. What do we got? God mode and vulnerability cheat. I'm going to copy that one in there because sometimes it's good to have conversations on cards that are easier to talk about than others. And this is a very easy conversation to have on that one. And then one more of — 90-degree turners. I like it. Copy that one. And do my Alpha Sprint. I have all these cards are on my Alpha Sprint board now as things that we're going to be doing during this sprint. So now what I'm going to do for us is let's do the Planet Poker process and let's use that website to do it. So planitpoker.com, I have cap lock on from attendance still. Let me go ahead and start a quick play. There are my room examples from the previous months. Let me delete those. Create a new room. Oh, 2505. Last example. Keep the strong values, that should be fine. Create that. Now it wants me to copy in every user story card for this sprint. I have created an automation tool to make this easier for you so you don't have to spend a crazy amount of time doing it. All you're gonna have to do is click this card here for Planet Poker card export. And it will read every card that you have on the board and create a new card over here. That's going to contain the title of every card. So it's gonna make it a little bit easier for you to do that process because you just grab the copy, the titles of the cards. Then go over here, hit paste, and then save and close. And then I'll add all of them as separate cards. So like just faster than going back and forth, clicking over and over and over again. All right, so we have that an example for us here for class. Let me invite a teammate. I'm going to invite everyone in here with us, right? So that's what I'm going to invite everyone to the group. Let me join into Discord here real quick so I can put it into the Discord channel. I also put it into my class chat here for you, Jeremy, here, so you can join in on that.
Thank you.
Here, go to class channel. In Dev 2 right now, there's Dev 3 posted right here, so everyone can join us in on this one as well. All right, so let me side by side now. Go. Wanted to be that far. All right, we won't be able to have everyone join, but it's going to be very close. Free versions of, like, before you have to pay for using this tool, you can have a maximum of 7 people in the room, which since we have a campus size of 6 and 1 person online, and me in there means 1 person will not be able to join. I'm not sure who that 1 person is going to be, it's whoever's last, but it does mean 1 person will not be able to join us.
Yeah.
I got 6 in there.
We have 6?
Hold on.
It's a race between four.
I mean, since you all are on campus anyway, like, you can still be part of the conversation, it just means you won't be able to actually use the tool. Oh, there we go, we got someone blocked. The room has reached limit of 7 people.
You gotta go get the deck for. Oh.
I guess that's true, you could use the cards, be part of that conversation.
Oh.
There's no reason everyone couldn't use the cards, but there you go, you get the cards then. Oh. All right, so let's go through some of these user stories. I'm going to hit start to begin this process. We are started. So everyone on these bids, I'm going to bid the coffee cup, just so I am not going to be influencing anyone else's bids. The coffee cup is essentially means like, hey, this one's not part of my workload at all, and I'm not interested in anything to do with this at all. You guys move on without me, I'm taking a break. This is what the coffee cup card is, which is slightly different of what the intent of some of these are. They also don't have a button for infinite on here, right? Coffee cup replace infinite, which are like, they're like complete opposites, right? You know, like infinite just means it cannot be assigned. Coffee cup is, hey, you guys go on without me. All right, so we have our bids available here. Let's start off with grappling hook. Right, so let's make an estimations on the grappling hook user story right now. So this is grappling hook that allows the player to reach areas that they could not walk or jump to. Does the game contain hardpoint static objects that can be attached to? Can the grappling hook only attach to the hardpoint objects? Can players shoot the grappling hook? Does the end get attached to that hardpoint object that first collides with? When the grappling hook end collides with an enemy, does it fail to attach and return to the player? When the grappling hook pull is completed, is the player located at the location the grappling hook attached to? After the grappling hook is attached to the hardpoint, if is, let me fix that. Well, there we go. Is the player pulled physically to the location? That actually should be in a different order. We'll do that. While the player is getting pulled to the destination, is their collider disabled? When the player reaches the destination, is their momentum zeroed out? I guess and collider re-enabled. put that in the wrong spot. Zeroed out to stop at that location. And collider re-enabled. Alright, so we have our user story defined dependencies. So these mean these are things that already exist before we even begin working on these user stories. So you can assume these are done and they're done well. Player movement, player weapon aim, player collisions, basic level to test on, and game object for hard points. All those things are already created and ready to go for you. If there's any questions about the user story, please ask questions. If not, we can make a bid on what you think it's going to take to get that user story done. All right, so here are our bids, and it is very spread out across our group. So what we have here, we have 1 hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, 8 hours, 13 hours, and 40 hours. All right, how about the person that wasn't able to join us? Where are you at in your bid?
My bid, okay. I'm on 40. I'm on 40.
You're on 40 as well?
Yeah, I'm on 40.
All right, so we have some pretty dramatic changes across this one. I guess let's start on the extremes here. Valencia, you said 1 hour, he said 40 hours. Let's kind of like discuss why we believe so different.
You know, from looks easy to make.
You're just not seeing any complications in it, just put together? Okay. Let's talk about the people that bid 40. What are you looking at taking the most time on this one?
Let's put 13 hours.
You meant to put 13?
Yeah.
You just misclick, it's supposed to be at the 13? Okay. Well, even with that, 13 is still a significant bid. Where are you spending most of your time in those 13 hours?
Probably enemy AI.
On enemy AI? Enemy AI shouldn't be part of this user story though. The enemy is like, they're completely, like, the only test case for enemies is don't do anything to them. If it hits an enemy, just don't do it. Let me see if we can just do a quick estimation on this one. Class average is 11.5 hours, which would put us in the 13 bucket. Does anyone adamantly disagree with 13?
No, not necessarily. It depends. If you're lucky, you can get it done in 5 or 4 hours, but you might have complications. You never know, and sometimes you have complications with things you fully understand.
And that's absolutely true. I don't want you to ever feel though that like you should bid higher just because you're unsure, because then you're not making accurate estimates at that point either, right? You're like, so like you do always want to make a best estimate. You did, and yes, you did. You bid that 5 hours. You thought it would take 5 hours unless something goes wrong. That's the right way of going.
Yeah, I don't know. I just want to talk about like my ears.
What was that?
Probably.
Yeah, all of this,
All of it?
all of it, the whole user story.
I mean,
For this user story to be done.
Get some of it in probably like, probably get like half of it done, probably like 80 hours maybe, or they could get it.
Okay. Yeah, half of it done in 2 hours. What about that other half?
The other half, I mean, I gotta look at it. I know there's a lot of features that I can check. Or like, I think it'd be, anyways, a lot of things in this long before you.
All right, well, let's step back on this one. Anyone adamantly disagree with 8 hours? Because it does seem like some people are disagreeing with 13 a little.
So why?
I wouldn't want to go past 8 hours, but I could see it taking that long or even longer. But
Could be taking it longer?
it could.
Yeah. So why 13?
Yeah, why 13? Yeah, like that's right.
Yeah, with people. Why 13?
I don't think. I mean, there's a lot of design behind it too, because hard points and everything have to be applied that.
Alright, so I thought it was
I guess,
2, because I think the hardest thing. I think the hardest thing is gonna be like the.
I've spent like 20 hours on just GitHub. You know.
Hit point and then play a position. Or feature the play position and then hit point.
The actual making.
So the hardest part is just the actual.
Well, if the hardest part is designing the level,
I guess that's.
I would say that's actually a dependency. Well, I guess like it's kind of a dependency. Like we have the objects, right? So like we have a object that we can grapple onto and pull myself to that location. For level design though, that would be a different user story, like making a level that's going to use it. So you could have this one be tested as true just by having 2 hard points just on the floor of a white box and being able to grapple back and forth between.
I'd go as low as 5.
Go with those 5 then at that point? You cool with that?
All the grappling hook does is make you go point A, point B. It's not that hard to
I mean, another challenge for this is it's C#. I've never done C# before the last class, so I also have to do a lot of research on how
C#
to.
and C++ are
Very similar, yeah.
Like, I mean, there's really not much to learn. Like, C# just does the memory management for you.
I didn't even realize that we were using C#.
I think it's easier, but my brain can get confused. So.
For each, and I was like, oh, that's right, that's a different language.
Well, the biggest difference, you don't have pointers, right? So everything is just a dot operator. You never have to use the pointing operator and like never have to allocate memory and like, so it is a simpler system, but it's also less efficient because of that. But yeah, like C# shouldn't be a major issue on here. Unless you're doing something that is explicitly involving memory management, then it might be like a little more of a conversation on like how we're gonna make this actually work. That could cause issues. All right, so is the class consensus, or at least the campus consensus, 5 then?
I'm about downgrading mine to 5. I put 8, but I was thinking too much of creating animations per player, maybe grappling hook, creating the code for the grappling hook to connect people over, but I wasn't thinking about alerting the player to go over. I wasn't sure exactly how. It might take me 8 hours. I don't know how much I'm going to pre-plan for that.
Okay. I personally would be fine with 5 and 8 on this one without any issues. It does seem like the biggest thing that we're having with this one in the conversation is grabbing additional work and just pulling it into the task with us. Because there is, like, this user story does have a lot of things that it can expand into, right? Like a lot of work that can be about this. Like, cause you could be like, well, like this user story is making all of Batman Arkham Asylum. You're like, well, I mean, it's in Batman Arkham Asylum, but we're not making the whole thing, right? We're making this aspect of it. Because like there's huge different aspects here. I would be perfectly fine with either one of these. If a team estimated and gave me a 1, I probably would put a red flag on it. Not that I would say bad, I would just say like, are you sure? Right? Like, this might take longer than that, is what I'd be bringing up on that one. Like I might push that a little bit forward for. Same with the 40, I would be asking me like, why 40? This seems like a high bid for this user, right? But I think 8 and 5, those completely make sense to me. We'll finish the voting on 8 on that. Let's go to the next user story then. Opening doors. All right, hit J to go to the next card on this one. It's just a hotkey that exists inside of Trello. So this one, opening doors. Can the player interact with and open doors on the level? Are there door objects in the doorway? Does the door have an open and closed state? When the closed state, or when changing states, does the door physically rotate to the other state? Can the player E to interact with doors? Is the player shown a UI element for interacting with the door so they know what button they have to input? When the player hits E, does the door move to the open state? Can enemies open the door through triggered reactions? Can the player recognize that a door can be opened from other doors that can't? Whenever the door is opening, is a physical ladder turned off? When the door is closing, is a physical ladder turned on to push things out of the way? Functionality that already exists before we start working on the door. E to interact, the door model and textures, so we don't have to find the model or create the textures, we already have them. And enemies and pathfinding are already working. All the functionality of the door is not functioning yet. So do we have any questions about this? Oh no, everyone already bid. I'll put my coffee cup here to see where everyone's bids are at. All right, so looking across this one, we have 1 vote for 1, 3 votes for 2, 2 votes for 5, and a coffee break for myself. Or is your bid? Because you weren't able to join us on the thing. 5. All right. So we have another 5 inside of here. So it's 3 and 3 across. So it seems like across team average, like 3 is an absolute average across the entire. We have like half people going 5, half people going 2. But see if there's even any extra conversation needed. Is anyone adamantly disagreeing with 3 hours from the door?
I just want to say I vote 5 just because I didn't go through the code. You haven't made that learning perfectly.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
if we were to go through it.
I think we could get it to work pretty fast, but the thing is, you need more time to make sure that it doesn't break the game. You know, like anytime you put a new interactable object in there, you have to go back and fix the other code too that connects with it.
I do kind of agree with you on that one. The door object, like when we're going through these test cases, none of these test cases are hard. Like every one of them is a simple thing. But it's a lot of simple things, right? There's a lot of like, let me get this one working, now let me get that one working, now let me get that one working, and making sure that they're actually working together with each other and not getting in each other's ways is going to take some time. Like, I know one thing that's going to cause issues on this one, the first time you implement it, is going to be the enemy tags being on the correct layer for that collider that's doing the bigger colliders, right? You're like just making sure that those layers are set up correctly to work with each other. If you don't have that interaction matrix defined correctly, it's not going to work. And you're gonna have to go in there and define that interaction matrix, which not hard work to do, but it's an easy thing to forget, right? Like, so you're gonna have like a lot of stuff like that. So I could easily see this one get kicked up, but I mean, I think
You get 3 hours.
it doesn't seem crazy hard to me in either direction. We have a pretty good plan put together on this one, from our discussion last lecture. I would think if we didn't have these user stories defined as they are, explaining how we are going to do this user story, I would probably kick it up higher. I would probably like to get high, like it might be actually like a 5 or an 8 if we didn't define how we're implementing it before I got to this user story. Like if it was just like make doors open, make enemies open doors, and that was the end of our conversation, I probably would get higher, right? So I'd be like, all right, what does it mean to get that done? That's gonna take longer. I can see the getting this one done in 3 hours. Let's go ahead with 3. Let's move on to this one, showcase level. All right, so showcase level is an interesting conversation point on this one. So this one is a level that can be loaded using a debug menu or debug key that checks or that shows all the created features in sequence. This would not be a level that the end users would see. It's just a space that proves the functionality works in an easily accessible way. So this will be removed for later builds. So the 2 test cases on this user story of can the level be opened without the need for the player to progress to unlock it, and does the level show each feature that can be created during the that is created during the sprint. So that's all the definition we have on this one at the moment. We can move on to bids, or we can move on to questions. If there are any questions for this one,
Yeah, I don't understand. So the player is not gonna see this.
right? The end user isn't going to see this.
So one of the requirements that the player has to be able to unlock.
What? Okay. The end player isn't going to see this, but our tester should be able to see it. So I guess what we're saying here for, see, can the player be open for player progress? I guess saying player progress. Yeah, it's like testing progress, or just, it's really just like without the need of unlocking it. It's really the thing that you have inside of here. You don't need to unlock it, you just need to do it, right? You need to get to it.
Okay, there's just blank space. So
Yeah, any questions on this one, or we can make bids?
I guess the thing for me is how many features are really filling out.
I think that's the biggest important feature on this one for sure. Because like, at the moment, I kind of think that the bid for this one should be a question mark, because I'm just like, I don't really know how long it's going to take unless I know what features I'm adding to this showcase. And I really feel like that's kind of where we're at on this one more than any other, because I could make a bid for this just by making the flat area and dropping prefabs in. That's done in an hour, that's not a big deal. But is this like 100 features I'm demoing, or is this like 2 features I'm demoing, right? You know, like it could take a lot longer in there. I think the features you're making are pretty critical to this user story. Which means for this user story, for the teams to assign this one thing I think you'll want to do is define what features you're showing off. So like, show off feature 1, then go ahead and not 60, there we go. You're gonna want to have something like that going on that's gonna say like, what features am I showing? And then I could probably make a bid on it. As is, I don't think I can put an accurate bid on this user story. So for this one, I'm going to skip. That's actually why I selected this one as one of our class examples, because I think that is probably the best answer. Is I can't give you an estimation on it at the moment. So it'd be part of the team's discussion on that. So I'm going to skip this user story. Yep, let's go ahead and skip. Next user story, changing options in game. All right, so this one is a little bit more involved, but it also has a lot of explanation on how to do it, essentially in here. So this is one of the TRC requirement user stories for the class. So this is something that every team is going to have to do, or every game is going to have. But it also has notes on how to implement it. So you can look through these and see what's involved in that. So we have inside of here. So dependencies, having menus, having game objects to play sounds with. Test cases for this one. Does the game contain an options menu? Does that game option menu have an option to change the music volume? When changing the music volume, is a preview of the current audio level of music? Does all the music in the game use that volume? Is there an option for the sound effect volume? When changing the sound effect volume, is there a preview? Do all the sound effects use that volume? Does the options menu save the user's configuration when they leave this menu? Does the game automatically load this configuration when this game starts up? And when setting the volume to half volume, does it audibly play at half volume? So like it sounds like what it should be. That's all the test cases we have for this one. It also has up here, the easiest way to implement this is by using Unity mixer groups. If you've never used Unity mixer groups before, here is the Unity documentation of how mixer groups work. Once it finishes loading for me, come on. Try that again. There we go. All right. So this is how mixer groups work. Is its own settings menu in the game. You set up mix groups where like you start with a master mixer, then you can make sub mixers underneath that. What you do is you make a sub mixer for music and a sub mixer for sound effects. And then in all the audio sources, you'd say what mixer to use. Like that's actually part of the audio source. So let me do that. Right, so audio sources, oh, that's not the one I wanted. I want the one that is part of the programming directories. Where is audio source in my dropdown here? I literally want audio source with the name, like not all these other things. All right, let's see here. Engine, accessibility, Android, Apple, audio. Classes, audio mixers, audio resource. Why are audio sources not showing up in here? That would be crazy if they got rid of audio sources like that. That would not make sense to me. Let me see if that is the case though. I'm gonna go back.
What do you system?
I'm gonna go back in versions and see if that's the case, because that would be insane if they're changing their entire audio system. All right, now in 6.0, let me try 2023. No, it's also not showing up in 2023. So they still exist, it's just not. Why are you not showing up for me? What's going on? That's the beta, I don't want the beta. I want my audio sources. I know you exist. I know you're a thing. Audio source.time, okay, let me go to audio source. That's audio source structure inside of here. So, all right, so audio source structures exist. That's not the version of this that I want. I want to have the one that actually gives me the inspector elements that we can look at. No, not the one that gives me the inspector elements. Is this just a case of their documentation being hard to search? Weird. I'm not seeing the screen that I'm looking for.
Would we like create a audio group and then like make a audio manager to manage?
Yeah, you don't even need an audio manager. Like these audio mixers do the audio groups for you. Like that's actually why I'm showing you this, because like it would be a lot more work for you to make your own audio groups and make a manager and have everything go through that manager. That's the page I'm looking for. I don't know why it's not showing up when I search. Yeah.
Wait, is this like this is like an add-on or a feature to Unity? That's cool.
The one is really small. It has 3 things to do. It was the second one, audio source input purpose.
Ah, thank you. Yes. That is what I was looking for. That's where you have this output group right here. This is where you just drag sound effect mixer or music mixer. And then you use that mixer for its volumes. So like you don't have to do any like manual coding for this feature to work at all. It's like literally it's all existing inside of Unity already for you. And it's cross-platform, it'll do everything you need to do. Some things in the documentation may put red flags for you though. Like I know when I'm in the audio mixer page, like right here, if I look down in the like compatibility, there are sometimes notes to be like, this isn't compatible with WebGL, or some functionality isn't compatible with WebGL. Everything we're doing is compatible with WebGL. The things that aren't compatible with WebGL are doing things like reverb effects and like all the actual like an audio board, like mixer board, right? Like that type of stuff. Not all of that's functional in WebGL. Just using the groups, that's fine, right? That you're not going to have any issues with that. All right. Yeah, I wanted to just show you that to be like, it is a thing that you can do pretty easily. There's also going to be like, here's a tutorial and here's a video tutorial on how to do this as well, right? So like a text tutorial that will walk you through the process, as well as a video tutorial that will walk you through the process. Because I don't want you to be struggling just figuring out how to make this one work when it's a standardized system, right? Another note involved in here though is when you do use those mixer groups to set volumes, it takes the volume in logarithmic form, which means if you give it 0 to 1, you will never hear any audio because 0 decibels is silent and 1 decibel might as well be silent. Like it is basically like all the way down there. You go to a much larger scale. So like all you do is you pass that 0 to 1 scalar value into mathlog 10 and then multiply it by 20. This sounds like a magic number. The multiply by 20 is moving it into the logarithmic scale that it uses for audio mixers, right? So like just do this, it'll convert the volume for you, it'll be fine. All right. Do I have any questions about this user story then that I didn't like preemptively answer? Because like this is one that I know I sometimes need to preemptively answer some of this stuff. Nope. All right, let's go ahead and make our bids. I'm gonna hit the coffee cup, just so I'm not affecting anyone else's bids. Just waiting on Justin. You have any questions? No? Okay. All right, so looking across this one, we have 1 hour, 3 hours, 2 hours. Most people are in 2-hour bid. That is also the average. Does anyone adamantly disagree with 2 hours? This is the difference of an hour, so it's like really not a huge difference when making estimations, but sounds good. We could do it in 2 hours. Next one, God mode or invulnerability cheat. Go to that next card. So does a player become invulnerable while God mode is active? So it's pretty self-explanatory, really. You know, like just can you enable God mode that you can no longer take damage? Unless there's any questions or concerns on this one. All right, we moved on this one already. So what do we got inside of here? 1 for 0 hours, 3 for 1 hour, 1 for 2 hours, 1 for 3 hours involved in this.
0, it's literally just toggling a switch. 5 seconds.
Well, I mean, to make the player not take damage is toggling a switch. You do still have to make, I guess, and actually that's probably my concern with this user story as of written right now. There's not anything in here for the interface of enabling or disabling. How do you like turn God mode on and off?
Yeah, maybe I have that, alright.
Yeah.
To make a menu button.
Yeah. So like I don't think it's hard. I think like it's very easy. I don't think it's quite 0. As defined though, I do think it's probably 0. I think we just need extra test cases to clear that up. Right? Because it needs to have like, is there a button to enable God mode? Right? Like or something like that. Like there we go. Like, is there a button to enable God mode in the settings? Cool. Yeah. Now I think that's a lot more clear on what we need to get this one done. Or if there's a hotkey for like if you hit F12 God mode, or I don't know whatever you want it to be. But yeah, I think an hour is probably more than enough time to get this one done. If our average across the classroom is closest to an hour, but we're looking at buckets, it's 2 hours. I guess is there anyone that adamantly disagrees with 2 hours?
I put 3 because like, I was gonna ask one question. So
You put 3 as an accident?
Yeah, so I mean it can be 1.
It can be 1. No one's adamantly disagreeing with 1. Let's go ahead and stick with the 1 then. All right. Next one, 90-degree turners. All right, so this is an AI enemy that is working in an incremental manner across the level. This is the type of enemy that exists in a lot of top-down shooters, or like Legends of Zelda. Like it is just, he exists, he takes a step forward, he picks left or right randomly, takes a step forward, picks left or right randomly, and just damages anything he runs into. That's all the enemy is. He has no active enemy or AI to track the player. It is just an obstacle that is an enemy form, essentially. So does that enemy move in a straight line? When he collides with an object, does he turn 90 degrees? Does he deal damage on collision? This is a nice type of enemy to add to the game whenever you have an issue where like it's too easy to circle strafe everyone. Because this guy's not actively chasing you, which means he will not be circle strafe. Like you have to actually pay attention to him with that.
do. It's insane.
All right, going to process 1, 2 hours, 2 hour, or 2 for 1, 2 for 3, 1 for 5, 1 question mark. Who's a question mark on this one? Victor.
Hate the idea of that enemy.
You just hate the idea of the enemy?
It's so dumb.
Should have got one coffee, good. You guys suck.
True,
He's
true, I
gonna
guess.
make that.
Like, why would that be in our mouth? I hate that.
Why would that exist?
I mean, it makes sense for
For
like older games. Top down.
For other games that are top down.
For top down, I guess, yeah, for a first person shooter, this doesn't really make
It's just
sense.
so far out.
Yeah, it would be a weird enemy in a first person shooter. But like to make the functionality work, I think this could get done pretty quickly. Like looking across the averages here, we have like 1 hour, 3 hours. I guess that puts the average at a 2, mostly. I guess a kind of a 3, because we do have the 1 5 in here. Let's look at the 5. Who bid the 5 on this one?
Doesn't really need to be 5.
Doesn't need to be 5. You're more than happy to drop down. All right. If we're looking at the 3 bucket, anyone adamantly disagree with the 3 bucket? You put the 2? You're adamantly disagree, or 2?
Yeah.
Anyone adamantly disagree with 2? I think 2's fair for this one. I don't think it's gonna be hard to make that one get done either. All right, that was all the user stories for our examples inside of the class. I do agree that this type of enemy doesn't make a lot of sense in a first person shooter type of game. But having an enemy that doesn't actively just chase after the player is absolutely useful in a first person shooter game. Right, you want to have them do something else because it is so easy to circle strafe in a lot of first person shooter games. You want to avoid that as an issue. Sometimes it could be through level design, sometimes it could be through NVAI, but whatever you do for that, there's other options. This is like one of the dirt easy ones though, to be like, I'm gonna spawn 30 of these guys around you, and then you have to fight your way out to be like, all right, which one's moving towards me first? Shoot him. It's a shooting gallery, essentially. All right, so that was our class example. We went through this process. Any question about the planning poker process that we went through in class with each other here? Step back, step back, step back. We're here, process in Trello. From process, okay. Okay, well then continuing on with this, the sprint process itself. Once you have finished the sprint planning, or once you finish that sprint planning meeting and the planning poker process, then you begin working on the project, right? You just work on it with everyone else, you complete the task, you integrate it into the main branch, you know, like everyone's getting their work done and they're working towards that final sprint goal. There's also a sub iteration that happens in agile teams of Scrum work environments where you're having your daily meeting, you're working on your tasks, and you're tracking your progress through those tasks. So that daily meeting is there to maintain transparency with each other, to hold each other accountable on anything that you're working on and set up help with each other when needed. It should be answering the following questions for every team member. What did you do? Meaning, I've completed this task. If this was a dependency for you, that dependency has been lifted. Or if you are available to do a peer check on this work for me, please do a peer check for me. Right? You're just communicating with our other team members. What has already been completed? What am I about to do? Let's everyone know where I'm working so we can discuss if that is the correct priority on what I should be working on. To be like, hey, I finished the weapons. I'm gonna start working on big head mode right now. My team member would be like, no, we don't need big head mode yet. We still need to have the player dodge roll. Dodge roll is more important than big head mode. Be like, all right, yeah, I'll work on dodge roll then. I'll get that one instead. And then what currently stands my way of getting this done is just opening up conversation. If there's a blocker in your way, right? To be like, all right, I need to work on dodge roll. The reason I didn't want to work on dodge roll yet though is because it has to do with all the player animations. And we are a first person game, and making the player roll in first person was going to make everyone sick. So I don't know how we're going to make our player roll inside of first person, because you can't literally roll in first person. That feels terrible. How are we going to do that instead, right? You're like, all right, so, all right, yeah, we're going to have to discuss how to make that actually happen. Dodge roll and first person shooter games are weird. Like I see a lot of games will actually have you like move to third person for a moment and then come back to first person when you do a dodge roll. But I can't think of many other solutions people have done for it where you don't feel sick when you dodge roll.
I think they nowadays mostly they just do slide Like they do a
It's
slide.
just slide, yeah, you
Yeah.
just like dash to the side instead. That would make more sense, honestly, than a little dodge roll in first person.
There's the old, like, the GTA way where you just do like this.
Yeah. I was gonna say,
Well,
Oh, just camera do a U shape.
and the side.
unless you change the camera perspective to like look at the ground and reposition,
Yeah.
you can't really tell the difference between a dodge and a slide, or when he's in first
That's
person.
true.
It's just a sprint basically
Yeah,
with a
you
cooldown.
don't want to have a literal 360 vertical when you do that, because that's gonna be terrible, but
We could be pioneers. Straight up.
I've definitely played games with it. That's not a pioneer. There's a reason people don't do it. So it makes
Let me
it.
have it.
All right, but anyway, yeah, so that's talking about blockers. That's the conversation everyone should have with the rest of their team every workday that they're working on the project. This should take the team 15 minutes. It should not be a long conversation. It should not be something that's like a huge drag on everyone's process. Even for like online teams, if you can't do this physically with each other, you can just have a Discord channel where everyone's putting a post on those 3 bullet points every day that they're working on the project. That will also do it, right? That'll maintain that communication as long as everyone's reading each other's posts, right? Like that is also part of it. Like if you're just posting into a void, that doesn't help, right? You have to actually communicate with each other during this process to let everyone know what's happening inside of here. And earlier I was bringing up one of those like Scrum and name only. This is probably one of the biggest red flags I've seen on Scrum teams. A lot of places where this 15-minute morning meeting is not a 15-minute just catch-up meeting with everyone, but is an hour to 2-hour meeting where we're discussing everything we're working on every day. Please do not let that be your case, right? Please do not let that be what you're doing. That is a terrible scenario to be in. It is humongously inefficient, and it just causes everyone pain along the process. And it is a bad way of going about it. Basically, every day I work from home, I hear this happen to my wife because she's a programmer at UCF, and her team has an hour meeting every morning, at minimum hour meeting every morning. And it drives me up the wall because I'm just like, hey, I completed 3 tasks while you're in your morning meeting today, right? You know, like it was just like this crazy amount of time that they're spending involved in that, and I hate it, right? So please do not let that be a thing for you. I've seen some teams do some pretty draconian measures to maintain this being a short meeting. I've had one team that used like test timers during these meetings to basically be like, if it is your turn to tell us what's going on, your timer is running, so you can see the cumulative timer of how much time each person is taking in our conversations. Every morning to be like, all right, you've been talking 5 times as much as everyone else. We need you to pull back so everyone else can be working on this process. That can happen. I've had some teams, they do physical challenges with each other on this, which I thought was hilarious. One team started by trying to be like, all right, to make sure we do this meeting really quickly, we're all going to plank during the meeting. And it'll be like, that's not going to last very long because planking for 15 minutes is a long plank, right? That's going to be more than you're going to want to get done. But I've also seen people take it to something that's a little bit easier to maintain during that. I think the one that worked the best was they basically did the Kung Fu horse stance during the meeting to force everyone into it, but which like you can do that for a while, but you can't do that for a half hour, right? You're not going to be inside of that meeting for, if you don't want to, that's where you like keep your thighs parallel to the ground and your arms in. Like you can do this for a while and you're not going to be too tired, but yeah, you're going to get tired after like 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes, right? You're not going to do that for a crazy amount of time. So yeah, like I've seen teams do crazy things to make sure this maintains to be short, because you don't want this to be a thing that's making people overly long and wasting their time during their days. All right. After that meeting has completed though, then everyone works on the tasks and longer follow-ups happen after that, right? If there was a case where like I had a blocker on the animation system and I didn't know who to talk to, I'd make a connection during that meeting and be like, oh, you know what we're going to do on this? Cool, I'll talk to you after the meeting. And then we talk after the meeting, right? Because there's no purpose in having everyone in the development team in this one meeting with each other when only 2 people are talking back to each other the whole time. Right? Let everyone work. Let everyone do what their job is. A lot of times being a good team member is just getting out of the way of your other team members, right? Allowing them to do what their job is. And then at the end of every day, we make sure that we integrate our work. So you want to always commit your work at least once a day on your project. Push to the remote as long as it's not going to cause you any main issues. I'll talk to you about that next lecture about how to do a Git workflow to make sure that you avoid issues when you're pushing up to the remote branch. But for the moment, at least, make sure you commit your work at least once every work day to track your workload during that process, but also update your task tracking. So put everything into in progress that you are currently working on. Put everything into to check when you're done working on it. Make sure you log your time on those cards when you're done working on that task. So be like, this task took me 5 hours to get done. So you can see how long it actually took you compared to your estimate, and you can get better at making estimates as time goes on. You can see if there's any major red flags that are coming up for you on a consistent basis, so you can avoid that in the future. And then you move forward from there, and that takes us through the entire process. Oh, I kind of got ahead of this. Oh yeah, I already talked about all of this stuff. So yeah, what we have inside here. So you want to make sure you're updating your status on all your stories as you're working through here. So everything starts as sprint backlog. You move it into in progress when you start working on it. You put it into to check when you are ready to be done, be verified on this. So this is basically telling someone else on your team to pull your branch, or telling someone else on your team to verify your work on the main branch. To just make sure that it's actually solid inside the build, and it only gets moved to complete when someone else on your team agrees with you. All right, so that's the daily process that we go about inside of the Scrum setup. And that's big, and I kind of like referred back to how Scrum gets its name by rugby, right? Where you start in the Scrum, you move the ball forward, and then you keep going forward. Or actually, you start in the line out, and you move the ball forward, and you keep going forward until you hit a scrum or a ruck, right? And you continue the process every day during the development cycle. But it may be possible that during the development of the project, you're going to discover things need to be changed inside of your product. Maybe they're just discovered to make the product better. Like we're playing our game and we're just seeing that there are things inside of our project that are just like dead, right? Like, like we're inside of a forest and this forest feels dead and lifeless as I'm walking through it. And it's supposed to be like a happy forest. And it's just like, it feels like I'm in the graveyard. So let's go ahead and add some more environmental effects in there. I'm gonna add in the ability for the tree branches to blow in the wind. I'm gonna add butterflies to fly around using particle systems. I'm going to add like little critters to run around the forest area as well, right? Like I'm gonna make the forest a little bit more of an interesting environment, but I'm not just gonna take that and immediately put it into production. I'm gonna put it in the product backlog so we can estimate it and assign it to someone on the next sprint, right? Because we're just discovering that is a thing that we need to add to our products. Maybe it's add from an outside influence, like our QA team finds this bug where if the player jumps, dashes, crouches all at the same time, they can get themselves lodged into this window in the wall. And then when they stand up while inside the window, they get thrown across the level at 1,000,000 miles an hour because their glider overlapped with the world glider. And it's just gonna like make them fly across as physics corrects itself. All right, that's a pretty fun bug. We're gonna want to fix that bug and make sure we don't have that one launched out to our users. Let's put that bug in the product backlog to work on it later. Or maybe it's just an expectation from the clients or the product ownerships, right? They're just like, you know what's selling really well right now? Battle Royale mode. Let's add Battle Royale mode to our game, right? And be like, all right, yeah, we'll think about that later and all the complications that's going to add to our product, right? So you put that inside the product backlog to work on it later, and that might be one of those scenarios where like maybe we'll work on that one later. And that's the reality of the product backlog. Is the product backlog, you're putting things inside of there so you can get back to them, but you won't get back to everything, right? That's just a known scenario that product backlog will contain more that you can get back to. And sometimes you might add things to the product backlog just hoping that you never have to actually put it into production, right? That is just it was a wish by the client that hopefully people forget and not actually want tomorrow. So like you throw it in the product backlog so you can work on it or pay attention to it later. All right. But by the end of the sprint, we want to make sure that we have a build to be delivered. We want to make sure that we have something you can show off to someone else inside of the team. We want to make sure that we have a functional product. So we have a code freeze by the end of the sprint as well. So the code freeze is just making sure we have that unified build actually achieved. So the entire team meets for that final integration. All work has been confirmed to have been integrated into the main branches of the repository. So you play through that build, or you look at the repository, make sure that everything is forward-facing or forward-facing or user-facing, make sure that everything adds value to the product and is ready to go. And then you export out a build of the game. You export out the EXE version of it. Then everyone on the team does a playthrough of that version of the game before you send it to the stakeholders. So you want to make sure that that is a solid state that is actually ready to go. At that point, once we have completed this process and we know that we have a good EXE build and everything's ready to go, and we submit it to our stakeholders, we lock that main branch of our repository. We just say like, no more changes to the main branch until we're done with the next sprint planning, until we've decided who's working on what and what it means to get those things done. Because we're going to be doing sprint planning based on this build, right? You know, like whatever that build is. So things shift between them. It might be communication issues. It might be working in ways that we don't actually want it to be working. It might cause our build to break when it was already working. So we want to make sure we have a good build between now and that next sprint planning. This process shouldn't be a crazy amount of time. Really what depends on how long this is going to take is how much the team has already been doing step 2, right? You know, like if the team has been doing step 2 all the way through the sprint, that's not going to take any time at all. If the team didn't integrate into the main branch at all during the sprint, that's going to take a long time. right? So just be aware of that, like however long it's going to take is really dependent on the team's actual methodologies inside of the repository and whether things have been integrated consistently and been tested consistently. Because we do have to make sure that they get tested before we actually deliver it to stakeholders. So that we take that build, we put it into sprint review, and we review what work was done. We discuss what work wasn't completed during this process as well. And then over the course of multiple sprints, we get a better game, right? Our product backlog is smaller and smaller. Our product itself is bigger and bigger and more feature rich, and we have a better product overall. And eventually this leads us to the product we're actually going to launch to our end users. But we might not be done, have emptied out our product backlog. Maybe they've just been deemed unnecessary. Like we're looking at like big head mode and be like, yeah, we can live without big head mode. We'll just not have that feature inside of our game. Maybe it's put off for a patch or an update, right? You're looking at like the Underworld Quest to be like, do we need to have this on launch? Is this a thing that we can patch in, or maybe put it in for a DLC package or something like that? Like, is this something that we absolutely need to have right now? If the answer is no, maybe we launch out without it, right? That's a common thing that does happen. Maybe it's put off for a full sequel. Right, that happens in the industry often enough as well. That you launch your game and you look at the product backlog, and that's still a full new game in there. Right, you still have enough inside of there that's going to take you to the next product along this ways. Some companies do this very well. Some companies don't do this nearly as well. And I'm sure everyone inside of here has some that they can bring up in either side of that category. On when they launch it with every feature you wanted to have launched, or that the users expected to launch, and then were you upset with the DLC that got launched out, and did it feel good for the DLC after that fact? Like a couple examples that I think are pertinent for this one myself. I think that the Volition Saints Row series did a great job of this. The Volition Saints Row series, talking about Saints Row 3 through Saints Row 5, and you had the Get Out of Hell expansion inside of there as well. Like, I think that was great. That was absolutely a continuation of the same code base. Like, there's no way it wasn't, right? That was like, they made one engine and they just kept making content for that same engine, and they just kept launching things out. But I thought that was a completely legitimate, good release on each one of them. People might disagree with me, but I thought it was very good there. For myself, one that I think it wasn't necessarily that good was, which one was it actually? Was it Street Fighter 4 or Street Fighter 5? I think it was Street Fighter 5. Yeah. It just launched it with like nothing. It was just like, what is this game? I have online play and 6 characters. This is crazy, right? And they did patch things in and made it better over time, but man, was that first launch rough. I think they overcorrected with 6. So like 6 started with so many features, it was crazy. But I think that was like that one, at least by itself, was a bad example. Anyone else can think of any good examples of the launch with too many features launched or patches that were putting in things that should have been in on launch?
Cyberpunk, but they
Cyberpunk's for a completely different reason. Yeah, like we
Yeah.
talked about that.
But I mean, they added more features in the DLC, but the one that I think of that they should have, that they never did, which maybe they'll do in a sequel, is multiplayer. Like, I don't know why they didn't turn that to like an online multiplayer game.
Well, I've been talking about that specifically. That can take us to the biggest example on this one, and that's the No Man's Sky.
Yeah, it was good.
Nice.
Yeah, like that was like, they had the list of features they wanted to have in the game. They launched it without most of those features because they pulled the trigger earlier than the promises they were making, right? And they patched it in after the fact, but like that was a pretty big one for sure.
Well, I realized they couldn't, like, the whole why they're doing first person. They say it's because, oh, you're supposed to experience like that, but if you look at the third person camera, it's a mess. Like the arms are completely unproportioned to the body. The camera's above the player, and that just seems like, like they wanted to have a certain first person experience and they couldn't have both cameras, so they just chose to go with, instead of fixing the third person, doing a whole nother system, they just were like, oh no, it's going to be a first person game. The modders can do that, like if they want.
Anytime you make a first person game allow third person as well is more work than you'd imagine it being. Because if you basically have to make a third person game and then also make first person work. If you make first person first and then make it third person, that's actually a lot more work. Because you have to like read all of the combat for that third person version. And
Yeah, it sounds like a pain.
yeah.
Yeah, that explains why Grand Theft Auto put it in so easily.
Did you have one? I thought you had one.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's why probably Grand Theft Auto works, because they started off as third person, and then when they got to their first person camera, it's like, oh wow, this is like
Ninja Storm 4. All right, I never played that one. But
Yeah, well, they had, you could basically go in like, it's like a room, you fight each other. But what happened is, like, once the 2 players were fighting in spectate, you just in a lobby.
Oh, that sucks.
So
Yeah.
it's like, if they finally pack that in, like, okay.
So no spectator mode in like a tournament fighting type? That, oh,
Waiting room with this, you know, just wait, trying to play. Can't even spectate. Just wait.
okay, that's a pretty big feature to not have. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, if you're like waiting for like literally tree brackets and you don't have observer mode and you're just waiting for your turn, that
I think
is the most boring experience you could possibly have, right? I could see that would be an issue for sure.
I should go walk up behind. Boss.
Did you play, Aria in the early days?
Which one?
The Aria,
I don't know that one. All right.
you know, Aria.
Wait.
Ferrari?
I'm sorry, did my accident?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry, yes.
Yeah, you said it different.
Terraria, yeah.
You got Nate in there, so.
Okay, no, all right, I got you then. Yes, Terraria.
Did you play that one in the early days?
I did not play that early days. I only played that very late into its life cycle. Like the internet moved off of it by the time I played it. So like it was.
Dude, it was like a 2D like picture of Minecraft and that's it. It was like
That makes sense, yeah. I think it's a very feature-rich game at this point, but I can see how that would happen as well, though, because it does feel like the game is like a foundation that they're just throwing things at. Like, add a new boss battle, add a new thing, add a new character, and they're just like, they just pop up and like now they're there. You know, it's like I could see how that could happen. All right, let's move forward on this then. So additional resources. If you'd like to know more about agile development or more about Scrum, there's a lot more that you can know. Like there is an industry around this for sure. Like there are consulting firms that exist to just teach people how to do Scrum better at their employee or at their studio. One of our alumni that is inside of the Full Sail Hall of Fame, Grant Schaukweiler. That's basically his job. He goes from like company to company, teach people how to do project management better inside of their companies, right? So like that's what he's doing at this point. So there's a lot that can be involved in this. You can be Scrum certified as well. Scrum certification is very different than a lot of other certifications. When you think about certification, a lot of people think of like N+ certification for like networking specialists. And that's the type of certification you need to have to be hired to do the job, right? Like that's like a prerequisite for getting a job. I've never seen a company have Scrum certification be a prerequisite. It's always a bonus. It'd be like, oh, well, that's kind of a nice thing to have on your resume, but it's not like, it's never going to be a bullet point on requirements that you'd ever have most places. So like it can happen, but not nearly as important in some cases. If you'd like to know more about agile development, more about Scrum specifically, some good places to go, scrumguides.org. That's probably the best place to go because this was written by the creators of Scrum, right? It's like literally like Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber wrote this page about how Scrum is supposed to be working, how you're supposed to work from person to person, how the organization is supposed to work. You can work through here and read through what they're talking about. We work through basically this exact process. Like we're talking about a lot of different things during this. Like the sprint planning process, how we like what can be done this sprint, why is the sprint valuable, what can be done, how do you choose what gets done, having your daily Scrum, having your sprint review, having your sprint retrospective, what artifacts are involved in it, like the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and the increment definition of what's being done, having your product backlog, having your sprint picking, like all the things involved in this is a really good write-up. The one thing they don't have in here is planning poker because that got added afterwards, right? That's not part of their process, that's part of someone else's process. In fact, I think planning poker is a copywritten term, is like Kleenex, right? Like it's not like just like everyone uses it. Let me check that. I'm pretty sure there's a company that owns the word planning poker, but I don't remember which company it is. Time boxing, gamified version, anchoring. Yeah, I'm not procedure. I'm not seeing who has a requirement here, at least from the wiki article from it. But almost positive that it was an actual copywritten term that a company owned.
I think at the very end, read about process.
First defined by James Bjorning in 2002, later popularized by Mike Cohen on the book Estimating and Planning, who trademarked the term. All right, so Mike Cohen has a trademark for the term. It's interesting, Mike Cohen on that one. Mike Cohen is one of the bigger names in this, founder of the Scrum Alliance and does certification on here, which will take us to the other sites that are actually part of this process. You have scrum.org and scrumalliance.org. Scrum.org is a place that you can be certified and also learn more about the Scrum process. So you can go to training and certification on here. So if I go to like get certified, the way that they do theirs is by basically automated tests. So you can become like a Scrum certified developer by doing the Scrum certified developer test. Let me see here. Where is product owner, Scrum Master, Scrum leadership? facilitator, professional Scrum developer. There we are. So you got to become a professional Scrum developer, be certified by this. You have to buy the test, take the test. It's $200 per attempt. If you know anything about certification, that price tag shouldn't surprise you. Actually, like, certification is almost always crazy expensive. That's actually really cheap for certification.
And it takes like an hour, it's always like.
Yeah, like, like when it comes to certification, that's a shockingly cheap one in comparison. We could go to scrumalliance.org, which is another place that you can become Scrum certified. This is actually probably the more respected of the two. They're both good, but this is the one that like looks a little bit nicer for people. It's also a lot more expensive to go through this process. So you want to be Scrum certified developer. I can go through here and I can look at what their process on here. Let me find Scrum certified developer courses and who's hosting them. Sperkel, Tone, Sherman, Judy. I'm not seeing him in here. I'm actually kind of surprised by that. I was actually looking for Mike Cohen because he's sometimes inside of this list of being one of the people that can be the person that's running the Scrum certification for you all. But yeah, so like you can get Scrum certified here as well. These are actively managed classes though, essentially, right? If you got to get more details on this, it's like you have to actually like attend this. I'm pretty sure most of them are attend virtually, but you do have to actually attend them. And they last for, what is this one? 2 days that you have to go through this, or I guess that's 3 days to go through this. It's also, how much is it? Where are you? Where's the price tag on this one? Oh yeah, there it is. $1,000. That's closer to what certification usually is, actually. Like that's like N+ certification, you're looking closer to that. I'm wondering actually how much is that right now?
Security Plus is 404, and that's a more technically useful certificate.
It's $370 right now for N+.
Security Plus is a little more.
Security Plus is a little bit more. CompTIA Security Plus. Yeah. So there's a lot more that you can know. There's a lot more you can do. But like I said, I don't think this should be a requirement for anyone. Like, don't feel like this is something you have to do. But if you have the opportunity to get it, it does look nice on your resume. It does look like you put you apart from other people. If you'd like to know more about the process, I really like this video series by Doug Rose on LinkedIn Learning. That is Agile Foundations series. It can go through more of the information about how Scrum works in the industry, how they manage things, and like this, just another point of view they can read from in case you didn't like my presentation of it. But that's what we're going to be using Scrum for inside of this class. We're doing Scrum to a fairly thorough version inside of this course. Like, we're not doing literally everything, but we're doing pretty close inside of this course of how Scrum is going to be managed for us inside of here. Do I have any questions from you all about any of this stuff?
When working for a company, who's usually in charge of like all the planning for the project? Is it like the programmers, or is there like a certified person that does it? Or
It's a mix. It's not usually a single person that's responsible for it. Like, you'd have the product backlog would be written by the production team usually. So like they'd be running the role of the product owner essentially, but the actual sprint planning meetings would usually be run by a development manager or your team lead. So like it's usually not the person that's actually doing like your year-end reviews, but it's the person that's directly involved in your team itself. So like yeah, I said like it's a mix of it for sure. Because that whole planning poker process is the entire development team. But then the product owner is more the designers and production team that's doing that part. All right, before we go on to anything else, it is 10:40. Let's go ahead and take a break before we move on into the next section. So let's break until, man, that's an awkward time. I don't want to go all the way to 11 because that's wasting a lot of time. Let's go until like 10:55 then, I guess, giving ourselves 15 minutes. But I don't want to be a full 20-minute break.
Recording in progress.
All right, let's keep going on this stuff then. All right, so the other thing I want to talk to you about today is involving all of this, the planning and estimations and everything along these lines. I can't really talk to you about all this stuff without really talking about some of the reasons why and the history of the game industry with them, or just general industry around them. Mitigating risk and loss is a big part of this aspect, right? Making sure that you're going to cause less problems in the long run by finding solutions for current things. So the best way to deal with risk is first by prioritizing things correctly. preempting the risk that's involved in it, and then reacting to the problems that they come up. When you're dealing with prioritization of things, realize that not everything is a deal breaker. Like that's one of the things that a lot of people kind of struggle with, is understanding that not literally everything in the game has to be in the game. Think about like what the demographics are involved in this stuff, what the stakeholders care about, what is it a direct blocker to someone else's task that they need to get done, or if it would make another person's task just easier to get done. All these things can play into how important it is to the product, but even more than that, don't think of it as on a single axis. Think about it in multi-axes for like what the overall priority is to this for your overall product. The first one is the obvious aspect of it, and that's just the impact that it has for our users, right? Like how important is it for our users? How much do they care about this existence out of the game? But the other axis you want to be paying attention to is how much effort is involved in adding that into the product. That plays into your decisions during this as well. Because you have quadrants like this one up here of the quick wins, which are things that are easy to add to the game. And also everyone cares about it, right? Like these are the things that should be high priority for things that you're really working on. This is like adding feedback for something inside the game. Like if you're making a platforming or like what was the term I'm looking for this one? Like an agility-based platform where we're doing like wall running and jumping off of platforms and like swinging off of objects. Feedback for like when you land on the ground is really important, right? That's actually like a huge thing, but it's also like no work, right? It's just like, did I collide with this thing? Play audio source, right? And like, that's it. But it's so it's like, it's very important for the game, but it's also very easy to add to the product. So that is like a very easy, quick win for the product. So like adding feedback for things, adding access to the product, adding additional pickups to the game, or adding additional functionality to that. All that stuff is quick wins that make your game a little bit better, or make your game a lot better in some cases, that take almost no effort to get into the product. But you also have the major projects. This is where you have things that everyone's going to care about and it's going to matter to your game a lot, but it's also a lot of work to get that into the game. So we have things out here like adding network play to the game, adding a boss battle to the game, crafting systems, a random map generation. Like these are like tasks that are critically important to the game, and it's going to take someone a lot of time to get done. It's going to take them weeks to get done inside of the game, or going to take them like 13 hours to get into the game, right? There are major projects to add to the product overall. So this is another high priority quadrant, but it's like actually kind of a little less priority than the quick wins are in some cases, right? Because you want to make sure that you're going to want to take from both of these, but these are things that are going to be just as impactful with a lot less work. So those are things that you can be a little bit higher on your priority list most of the time. You also have the things on the bottom quadrants, like fill-in work. These are things that are like, it's quick to add to the product, but also not that many people are going to care about this, right? So like, it's not a big deal for anyone having the game. It's work that we can do, and it's work that it might be like you want to have inside of the product, but it's not a selling point for our game. It's not something that's going to change reviews. It's not things that are going to change people's decisions on things. This is like adding more game settings into the game. Like I'm going to add a setting into the game for monitor brightness. Like, all right, how important is that to our overall demographic? How many people will use it? I mean, some will. I'm not saying it's not going to be a used feature. It's going to be a less used feature though, because people also have just brightness on their monitor, right? They can also just turn the game up at that point, right? So like, it's not that huge of a feature. How much work is it to add to the game? Also, basically no work, right? You just go into the graphic settings in Unity and just say like increase brightness, done, right? There's nothing else for involved there, right? So it's not a selling point, not something that's going to really care about, but you could add to the game. Or like weapon stats is one of my favorite examples of this one, because that's where you have like, all right, I have a shotgun that already works. Now I'm going to add in the shotgun that does more damage. Like, cool. Yeah, that's the thing that kind of added to the game, but no one's going to be selling the game or buying the game based on the damage output of this new shotgun that you added to the game. Maybe the feedback for it, maybe the animations for it, or maybe other aspects of it could get you there, but just stats, that's not going to move anyone's, that's not going to move the needle for you. Then you have things down here where you have like the thankless tasks. This is where you have high effort and low impact tasks. And when I mean low impact, I don't necessarily mean no one's going to use it, but I mean it's just in general impact for the game. It's less of an impact for things. This is where you have, and some of these are debatable depending on the project you're working on as well. Like persistent world saving. In a lot of games is a low impact, high effort task, right? It's going to take a lot of work to literally save every object in every state in every section of the world at any moment. So you go to save and you're going to load in that exact state of the game back into the game. That's going to be a lot of work. And a lot of games just don't need that feature, right? It's just not going to be that useful for them. Like there's not a huge difference between loading in exactly where everything was or just starting at the beginning of that level again, right? Like if you did like persistent world saving in a game like Celeste, it's not going to make that huge of a difference than just starting at the beginning of the room again, right? Like it's not gonna be a huge change for the overall project, but it'll be a lot more work to add into the game to do it that way. Other games, might be in the top quadrant for a game like Minecraft. Yeah, that's in the top quadrant, right? You need to have that for that game to exist, right? Like it has to have personal saving or the world won't play the way you need it to play. But in some games, it'd be in that lower quadrant. Another one that I like to put inside of here, like as an example, button mapping. There's another one that by default, its implementation is hard to do. And this is a really obnoxious thing that's hard to do inside the Unity engine because the default Unity input system doesn't have a way to do button key binding. You have to make a wrapper around it that's going to take in-game events from button inputs and send those events to game objects and make it do it that way. If you convert your game to the quote new input system, I say quote because it's like 10 years old, but it's still called the new input system and it's not the default, right? But if you convert to the new input system, then it has button key bindings, but then you have to refactor all of your input code to use the new input system. Right, so like this is a thing that's going to be like, it's going to take a lot of effort to get that into your game. It's going to take some time to get that into the products. And then how many users are going to actually use cut button rebinding? There's going to be some. In fact, this is going to be a high priority feature for a specific user base, but the majority of our user base isn't going to care about it, right? You're like my friend with one hand really cares about button mapping, right? If you can't do that, you can't play the game, right? That is a critical feature for him to play the game because he has to play games with a custom controller. If you can't rebind buttons, it does not function. Right, so like that is a critical game mechanic for him. But the majority of players, whatever the default keybinds are, is just what they're going to use, right? They're just going to go forward with the game at that point, unless the game does something really weird, where like we're going to change our vertical roll, right? To be like you go up to go down, and like down go up, and it's not a flight sim. Like, all right, well then people are going to use your keep binding all the time. But I mean, unless it's something like that, it's going to be a less used feature. So this is really what we're talking about inside of it. You should be working towards your priorities. So work down those lines, right? When you're starting to work on your tasks, work on the quick wins and work on the major projects and jump back and forth between them and until all of those things are done before you start working on anything down here in the bottom set quadrant, right? You're like there's no reason for someone to be spending all of their time on button mapping if we don't have the boss battle yet, right? You're like, because this will sell games. This is things that people will talk about. These are the things that people want to have inside of the game. This is like, that's going to majorly change your game experience. This will just open us up to a slightly larger market, right? Like there's a completely different appeal to the two of them. I'm not saying anything down here is bad. They're good things to have in the game. These are just a higher priority, right? So make sure you're working towards those priorities when you're working on your project to make sure you have the best product you possibly can.
Sorry, just as a pet peeve, take it back. Your impact and effort is switched.
Is it? Oh yeah, you're right. This should be here and that should be there. Yeah. Oh, that's weird. Why is that the case? Let me check that. Can I change that right and on this slide? Or is it? That's not gonna be quick. All right, I'm gonna have to do that in a little bit. All right. But yeah, I'll fix that because you're right. They're swapped. Oh, come on. Why does it do that? Sometimes when I go from full screen to windowed mode, it will just disconnect the projector. I have no idea why.
Just roll it back up. Rod had to manually roll it back down.
For some reason, like 2 or 3 times during every class, it would just.
Just shut off and roll back up and be like, all right, well, I guess we're taking a break now. Yeah, that's annoying. There's been a couple rooms that have done that. I hate that. All right. All right. So next thing inside of here is preempting risk, right? So know where everyone's skills are at when you're working on your project and then work towards everyone's priorities during this process as well. You might have someone on your team that is just a known less capable member. And I don't mean this to insult anyone. I'm not aiming this at anyone, right? But if you have someone on your team that is just a known less capable member, you know, when you're looking at that priority matrix, give them stuff down here, right? Because like when you're looking at the stuff down here, it will make our game better. But if it's not going to be a game critical thing for a product either, right? It's not going to be something that's going to make or break our product being a full release candidate. So like, you know, like put them on stuff that's according to their skills, something that they want to work on or something that's better for the game. But, you know, like keep that in mind, the actual priorities during that sprint planning meeting, preempt the risk during that process. Don't put them on things that are game critical to our sprint goals. Put them things on that are in the game that are a little bit more supplemental. That'll make our game better, but not critical for everyone else's process. I got to tell myself. That's exactly what I'm saying. All right, and then react to things when they go off track, right? That's why we have those daily meetings, right? That's why we're logging our time on tasks as well. That's why we're moving things on that sprint board. Because that way, when we're having that daily meeting and we're like day 2 of the sprint, and this is the second sprint meeting that we're having, and we're hearing that like what I'm working on next for this one person on the team is still just working on like adding a weapon stat in for for Shotgun Plus. Something that person estimated is going to take him an hour to get done, and he's been working on it for 2 days. We can discuss what's going on right then, right? You like discuss it early on in that process, rather than waiting until the end of the sprint to be like, hey, where's all your progress? Like, what's going on during this? So like, you're like, we want to know when this is going on so we can correct if there's anything that needs to be corrected. So that way, if someone has something that is absolutely critical for our product, actually critical for the success of our build, and is given, and someone has it that's struggling with it, maybe we could reassign tasks, right? You know, give it to someone else. Like, I'm going to take you off of that one. I'm going to give you this one instead. We're going to like just restructure this so we can go forward. If that happens, let me know, right? You like just send me a message to let me know, to be like, oh, I'm taking this from him and he's taking that from me, just so I'm clear on what everyone's assignments are. But yeah, you can do that, right? That is a legitimate solution that you want to do during that process, is respond to those problems early so they don't cause you problems like the day before the milestone turn, right? You like correct these things earlier on, so you don't have any larger scale issues. And then another reason why a lot of these methodologies exist, or why you're going to go through this process, is try to avoid burnout whenever you can. Because we don't want people to burn out during this process. That has never been anyone's goal, is to burn anyone out. But let's talk about what burnout is. So burnout is being in that extended state of exhaustion, right? Where you're just like, you're not able to think, you're not able to work, you're either like emotionally, physically, or mentally overtaxed, and you're just like not able to pay attention to things anymore. Or maybe it's just like an increased level of cynicism. Like everything you encounter is as negative as it possibly can be, just because like you're just primed for that any struggle you're going to hit is going to be the worst struggle you can possibly encounter. So you just have a general bitter attitude to everything you hit. Maybe it's just an increased level of inefficiency. I know for me, this is the way that burnout hits me the most often, is like, just like, I know this task should take me 10 minutes. I recognize this is a 10-minute task, and I've been working on it for the last hour and a half, right? Like, I'm definitely in a state of burnout to be like, I need to step away from this for a little while, get my head back in the spot where I can work again, and then come back. I'm going to be more efficient for people at that point. What causes burnout? The biggest reason burnout can hit people is long durations without breaks. It's an obvious, right? If you're working like you're working 7 days a week and without any breaks during this process, you're not taking time off. You've just been, you've had like 10 days off in the last 5 months. Yeah, you're going to start burning out. It's going to cause you issues in the long run. Too much work without enough resources to complete them, also an issue with burnout. We should be avoiding that in the Scrum process, though, because we should be part of that conversation on how much work each person is taking. We should be putting things back if we have too much, if possible, or we're discussing why it's the case when it does come up. Lack of control over one's work can cause burnout and burnout in the long run. This one's going to be a much longer term issue on this one, though. This is going to be talking about like 10 years or like a decade type of level. Where like I'm just so sick of working on Barney Horse Adventure Riding Camp. I worked on Barney Horse Adventure Riding Camp 3 through 17, and I want to work on a different game. Can at least not be assigned to the next Barney Horse Adventure Riding Camp. Let me put me over on this other team instead. Be like, all right, yeah, that could cause a burnout in the long term during this one as well. Inadequate rewards can be another part of this one as well. That's again going to be a long term one, but especially in the case of overtime, if you're just not getting paid for that overtime or the payment for it isn't adequate, yeah, that's going to hit this process pretty quickly as well. And lack of achievement or completion, not shipping projects can be another one that can run into this one. This one has been interesting, but I've definitely had some friends in the industry that ran into this, where they were working in the industry for like 5 to 10 years, and they could never tell me what they're working on. It was just like their resume, it just listed as unannounced title, unannounced title, unannounced title, because they worked on one, they got it all the way until first playable, and it got canceled, and they worked on another one, it got all the way until early alpha, it got canceled, and they worked on this next one, and now this next one was for a sim company that was working on secret clearance, so they weren't able to talk about it at all, right? So like they're just like, their resume is just like, yeah, I've been a developer for the last 10 years. Hey, what have you done? I can't tell you any of that. Like it's just like it's completely private across the board. You're like, well, that kind of sucks. Yeah, like that is a hard scenario to be in, and that definitely happens for some people during this process. If it lasts for too long and you don't have support to help you through that, like it can cause you issues. All right, and then lack of access to friends or family or supportive coworkers in the long term will cause you this one as well, right? So these are all obvious reasons why you could burn out during this process. And really, what this is talking about is that psychology 101 topic of just like the Maslow hierarchy of needs. right? Like you have the base of your pyramid, which are your physiological needs. So you know, like the need for water, sleep, and shelter, right? You know, like these are things that are critical for your existence as a human being. If you don't pay attention to things in the bottom of this pyramid, because you're paying attention to things higher in the pyramid, eventually you're going to be forced to pay attention to things in the bottom of the pyramid, right? You're just going to be pulled back down to it. And the reality of working in the game industry is pretty high on this pyramid, right? Like when you're looking at working in the game industry, if you can become a programmer in the game industry, you could also be a programmer making like banking software. Or it could be a programmer working at you know, just making some apps at a different company, right? You can work at a company that is less stress and less overtime and less burnout in the long run during that, which means like game industry is high in this pyramid. So just try to make sure you're always paying attention to the base of your pyramid as well. Don't put yourself in a scenario where eventually you're going to force yourself to be paying attention to it because you burnt out. I don't want that to happen to anyone inside of here, and that does happen in the game industry fairly often, right? So be in a state of being able to work, you know, like get sleep, eat, take breaks, you know, maintain your humanity outside of development, right? You're not a machine that turns button doing and beats into code, right? There's more to your existence than that, and you have to pay attention to those other things, or eventually you will be forced to pay attention to those other things completely out of your control, and you must rather do it when you are in control of it. And we can't talk about this with the game industry specifically without talking about crunch mode, because crunch mode is the reality of this. Right, so crunch mode is that extended level of output from a team without increased compensation. So you're like working far beyond 40 hours a week, or you're working far beyond 5 days a week during this process. So what causes crunch? The biggest cause of crunch anywhere I have ever worked is self-imposed. And I don't mean this like as just like I'm trying to dismiss crunch culture, because that's definitely a thing. But I mean, the reason why crunch happens more often than not is because of the thing that the team did to themselves, right? It could be just a scenario of procrastination where like, I know that I have like, or like we have like student syndrome, which is a term I've made up. You can look it up on Wiki, it's on up there for student syndrome. And that's where like, you know that like this task is going to take you 10 hours to get done. And you know that you have a week to get it done, which means you're going to start working on it 10 hours before it's due, right? You have like that scenario kicking up inside of here. That's going to cause yourself to have to crunch and cause yourself to have long, terrible weekends if it suddenly takes you more than that 10 hours, if your estimate was wrong. Right now, you're going to have to burn yourself out. Now you're going to have to push yourself through things in a way that you didn't expect it to be. It's going to cause you issues, or you're just going to miss your dates, and that's going to be bad as well. The other common reason for this one is perfect being the enemy of good, and this is kind of like the opposite type of person. This is where you're working on a task, and you are making that task the best possible version of that task you ever could possibly see, right? You're going to work on that grappling hook, and you're going to add in like the animation for the cape waving in the back behind Batman as he's flying through the air. You're going to add in speed lines flying across the screen. You're going to add in objects being like pushing out of your way, like the enemy is going to like react and jerk out of the way of the grappling hook instead of just going around it, right? Like they're going to do all this extra stuff for that grappling hook, and it's going to be the best possible grappling hook you've ever seen in your life. You estimated it was going to take you 3 hours to get done. You've been working on it for 40, right? You've been working on it for this whole time, and it's amazing now. And like, that's awesome that you have that amazing part of your game, but you also have these other tasks you didn't get to yet, or you have all these other things you need to have. Now we don't have the boss battle. Now we don't have the inventory. Now we don't have the quest system, right? We don't have all these other things. You might have this one amazing part, but we don't have everything else. So like what I'm saying here is, you know, like perfection is something to strive for, but don't let it be the enemy of the good as well, right? Don't let it get in your way of getting everything complete. So like get everything functional, get everything good and workable, then perfect it, then go back and polish it, make it better, rather than letting yourself to focus or overly focus on the one small task before you move to anything else. The other reasons for crunch, I mean, there's the obvious one. Company imposed, right? You're just working for a company that's forcing you to crunch, right? That is a very real scenario that happens during this process as well. You might be given unrealistic deadlines. So you're given 2 weeks of work to do, and you have 1 week to get it done. There's not really a way to get out of that without crunching, right? That's the scenario you're going to be in now. Pre-scheduled crunch also being a common thing that happens in the industry at a lot of companies, where you have like, we know we're going to launch our game for Christmas, and we're going to launch our game for Christmas. That means it has to be on the store shelves in early November. And if it has to be on the store shelves in early November, that means that we have to ship it to our distributors in September. If we have to ship it to our distributors in September, that means that we need to be done working on it in late August. And if we have to be done working on late August, that means that we're going to start crunching in July. Right? Like that I have worked at companies that have done that exact logic. Be like, all right, we're all working 60 hours plus from July until August, because we know we need to meet the launch date, and we know we have more work than we need to get done. And it comes to a point where like we're actually scheduling ourselves for 60 hours worth of tasks preemptively. So now if anything goes wrong, now we're working 80. Now we're working beyond that even during this process. Don't let that happen to you if at all possible, because that can cause issues for sure. And then the final aspect of this one is cultural. There is definitely a cultural aspect to crunch during this process as well. We have crunch culture and hustle culture, seeing those like long working hours as virtue rather than a vice, to be like, yeah, I'm amazing. I've been working 80 hours a week every week for the last 3 years, and I'm making all my dreams come true. And be like, all right, that's awesome if you can maintain it. If you can't maintain it though, and it's causing yourself detriments during this process, that's going to be a long-term issue that you're going to want to watch out for. I do know some people that do work 12-hour days every day, and they've done it for like the last 2 decades. They're just set up to do it that way. If you're that person, amazing. That is not everyone though. Not everyone can work 12-hour days literally every day, and be aware of like where your lines are on that. But then crunch is just seen as normal by a lot of people in the industry. My favorite quote on this one is by Michael Patcher from the Team Bondi's LA Noire development. LA Noire development, you could look up horror stories from LA Noire. There are a lot of things that happen inside of that system, inside of that company during that development. But this is a quote from one of his interviews. If your complaints were that you worked overtime and didn't get paid for it, find another profession. The Team Bondi staff are asked to work crazy hours. I don't know anyone in game development who calls it a 9-to-5 job. So that was the post that came out from him during that. Then that's the reality of a lot of people inside of the industry. So just be aware of that those are the people that you will be working with in a lot of cases, and you're going to have to work around that. And know if that is the studio that you're working for or not, because that's where their expectations might be for you. All right, and we really can't talk about quality of life in the game industry without talking about EA Spouse, because EA Spouse is really where the rubber hits the road in the game industry on where the game industry is right now, even though this happened 2 decades ago. So we have EA Spouse, or EA The Human Story, was a blog post from, I forget what her name was, but it's like the wife of an EA developer that was working at EA LA. And she put a public post on her, I think it was like WordPress page or something like that, about like what her husband was going through while working at EA, and like what the hours are, how this has been affecting her family and her life. And like, it was an interesting post when it came out. And when it first came out, it got a lot of press in gaming circles. Like a lot of people in the gaming circle started sharing it with people, and they're reading it from place to place. And like it started going on like GamaSutra.com or GameInformer.com or GameDeveloper.com. All these different websites start talking about it. And a lot of people in the game industry read it, and it was just like, yeah, that happens. I've been there. I know that's the case. I actually worked for EA in 2005 or in 2004. I'm sorry, that's when this one came out. I worked for EA in 2004. And when I read this story, that was my reaction, which is like, yeah, that happens. I've lived that. That's part of this process. I didn't work at that studio. I worked at a different studio. I worked here in Orlando at EA Tiburon. This was EA LA that he was working, right? So like it was different studios out of the same overall publisher, but like I was definitely in that scenario to be like, yeah, that happens. But it kept getting steamed. It kept getting more people looking at it. It kept going into the press, and it started getting press outside of the game industry. It started went into like just general, like it started going into like Kotaku for the general game players. Then it started getting into like regular like New York Times type of press on this one as well. And a lot of people just kind of turned to the game industry, and like when we were saying like, yeah, that happens, they went and be like, what the hell's wrong with you? That's not supposed to just happen, right? That's like, why are you so accepting of this? Why is this the scenario that you're just happy to live in? You're like, well, it's just been the way it's always been. That's just how we do it in the game industry. Be like, and it was kind of like an eye-opening experience for the game industry in a lot of cases, because the game industry has shifted significantly since then, because there were a lot of scenarios like that. And it is far from the only example. I can go through a lot of different posts about a lot of different companies, a lot of different studios that have done a lot of similar things on how crunch has worked through their process, and how they got a lot of press about it. Rockstar Spouse being another really big one, actually, that happened. We had a lot of Full Sail developers working at Rockstar when that one happened. So there's a lot. This does happen in the industry quite a bit, and the game industry has kind of woken up from a certain amount, but crunch is still a reality. Like that is something that does happen in the game industry. So where are we right now? Like where are we as far as the game industry is concerned when it comes to crunch mode? So this is taken from the Developer Satisfaction Survey in 2003. The 2005 won't come out until 2006, right? So like, it comes out every 2 years on an odd number year. So like we're still waiting on the next one to come out. So like this is what it was in 2003. So we had employees have worked like the average employee, which is that's the green line right there. So the average employee is working 40 to 44 hours. About 35% said they work 20 to 39. And then we only have 1% less than 20. That's kind of crazy, less than 20. So like the vast majority of the game industry is working 40 hours a week, or about 40 hours a week, which is pretty awesome, actually. Like that's actually great that it has gone up by a significant amount. There is still companies and there's still people that their regular work hours is beyond that, right? Like if we're looking at like 45 to 49 is another 9%, 50 to 59, that's another 2%. More than 60 a week is another 2%, right? Like when you're looking at this, like there's still companies that are doing this, but it's a lot less. And it's also kind of interesting when you look at the values involved in this as well, where you're looking at freelancer or self-employed, they go up. Like I was saying earlier, like self-imposed is one of the more common reasons crunch happens. When you look at self-employed, there are more people crunching in self-employed than employed, right? And like, so it is a self-imposed process very frequently. All right. But what crunch can still be higher, right? Because that's regular work hours. Does crunch mode still exist inside of the industry? Yes. Like there's no way around that. There's absolutely going to be crunch happening inside of the industry. When you're looking at the numbers involved in this, number of people that have never had to crunch in the last 2 years, the answer no to that question is 6% of the industry, right? That's like almost no one, right? Like crunch is a pretty common process that people will have to go through. Crunching once is 11%, crunching twice is 8%, more than twice is 75% of the game industry involved there has had to crunch at least more than twice during that process. What does crunch mean for the game industry? Like how much is crunch going to be? For employee, which I don't know why their graph shifts orientation during this process, where like the last one was self-employed was on the top, now self-employed is on the bottom. But or like back and forth, but like I don't know why they shift. But when you're looking at like numbers inside of here, for employees, what does crunch mode mean? All right, so crunch mode, this company means 20 to 39 hours is 3% of the industry. Less than 20 hours is 10% of the industry. That's not crunch. I don't know why they're inside of here. Well, like they said, yes, I crunch 20 hours a week. I don't understand that one, right? I don't know where that's coming from. But I mean, other ones like crunch is 49 hours a week. That's 28% of the industry. Crunch being less than 60, 31, less than 70, 21, and then like 70 and 84% and plus 84% of the industry is what crunch mode means during this process. So it is still a real thing. It still happens out of the industry, but there are trends you can look at during this. So like regular hours have gotten better over time. When we're looking at regular hours, you can see back in 2004, because the IGDA has been collecting this since 2004. That's not a coincidence of year date. This got started because of EA Spouse, right? So they started collecting this stuff in 2004. And back in 2004, 60 plus hours regular work week was, like that's 20% of the industry. That's only 2% of the industry right now, right? That has dramatically dropped over time. The game industry has gotten better about it over time. And even crunch has gotten better. We are still crunching, but the crunch is becoming less, it's getting smaller during this process. And this actually, when you're looking at the articles, or if you look at the surveys over time, you can see one of those things that can happen in surveys where like the values can sometimes lie to you. If you just looked at like, I crunch yes, it'll be just a straight slope. But then they added in 2011 or 2017 an option of I don't crunch, but I work long hours. And that kicked it up higher inside of this process. So like that, but you can see even with that in mind, it is still a dropping slope. It's still going down during this process. Even like the how many hours you're crunching per week is like a slope going down. That the industry is crunching less over time. So like be aware of that. That crunch will happen in the industry. But don't push it on yourself. Don't make it be a thing that you have to do when you don't have to do it. I don't want that to be a thing that you feel like no matter what we will crunch. Crunch should be a response, not a pre-plan, right? It should not be something you're automatically going into. All right, so why is crunch a problem? Why is crunch an issue during this? Well, I mean, mainly because like productivity isn't consistent, right? You get more productivity. You get more productivity in the first 4 to 6 hours than you do in the rest of your day, right? Like you're going to get more done in those first 4 to 6 hours than you will as time moves on. After enough time, productivity reaches 0 and can become negative. You can be negatively productive on your product if you're just like continue working in the code base and your brain is just fried and you're causing more things for you to solve tomorrow than you are solving today, right? You're breaking everything inside of it, right? You're negatively productive. Versus having the person that goes home, air race climb as work goes on, especially with loss of sleep. Loss of sleep being a critical aspect there. You need to sleep to be able to think, right? So make sure you bleed your fingers. But if you take your break and let yourself periodically rest throughout the day, you will be more productive overall than the person that's just working straight. Like you have one person working 48 hours and he never takes a break for all 48 hours. That person is going to be useless to you at the end of that compared to the person that worked 8 hours, maybe 12 hours on each one of those days. So during that process, he could still keep working. He could still get more done for you at that point. So stop working at the end of the workday and get your sleep, please. Those things are important for you. All right, but why is this all coming into play why does crunch happen at all is because you do actually get benefit from crunch on the short term, right? Like there's no way around that. If you have one team working 60 hours a week and another team working 40 hours a week, the team that's working 60 hours a week will get more work done on that first week and the second and the third and the fourth. It takes months for them to start breaking even, right? For the team that's working 60 hours a week to getting the same amount of work done as the 40 hours a week. And it takes even longer for it to be a true break even, where the team that's worked 40 hours a week has gotten the same amount of work done as the team that worked 60 hours a week. It will eventually happen, but it's going to take some time. It's going to take you a while to get to that point. So crunch is useful for short-term gains, but you never want to do it in the long term. In the long term, it's going to cause you a lot of issues. But I also want to put another asterisk on this one. That's a pretty important one. Because while I'm decrying the issues that are involved in crunch mode inside of here, crunch culture inside of here, I don't want you to think that you should immediately at 8 hours slam your laptop shut and not pay attention to anything anymore if that's not what's going to work for you, or if that's not going to work with the mentality that you're in at the moment. There is a significant difference between pushing yourself to crunch or sticking with a groove when you're in a groove. Hopefully someone or everyone has at some point hit in front of your compiler and you're typing your compiler, you hit compile and the code did exactly what you wanted it to do. And you go back to it, you type the next thing in there, and you hit compile, it did exactly what you wanted it to do. And there are rainbows spewing from your fingertips into the compiler, making your dreams come true. And it looks like everything is perfect. Like the ability that you possess and the challenge of the thing you're trying to do are perfectly synced with each other, and your head is in the right spot, and everything is amazing, and you're more productive than you've been for the last 10 months. If that's where you're at, don't feel bad about continuing to work for that, right? Like, that's great. Like, I don't want to say that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying, recognize when exhaustion is starting to take your work and correct that, right? And see where that's coming in. Because if you're working at that end of the 8 hours and you're not in that mentality and things are struggling for you, walk away, take a break, and that's going to be better for you. I've had this conversation with a lot of people in the industry and a lot of students here at Full Sail as well, where they tell me, I've been working on this problem for the last 48 hours and I haven't slept and I can't figure out how to do it. Be like, well, yeah, it's probably because you haven't slept for the last 48 hours. Take a nap. Right? You need to actually think what you're going to go through right now, right? You need to have some more time from this, right? That's really what I'm talking about involved in this. You have to be able to think, you have to be able to work, see when exhaustion is taking work and correct those problems when they do come up. And don't put yourself in a spot that you have to crunch if you didn't really have to crunch. When we do our sprint planning in this class, we're going to be planning 20 to 28 hours worth of work every week, which isn't a minor amount of work. I'm not saying that that's not going to be a crazy amount. But that should be maintainable too. That still should be something you can get done within a week worth of time, right? I don't want it to be something that you have to burn yourself out to do. All right, if you want to have extra lessons on this or extra resources on this, there's Evan Robinson, Why Crunch Mode Doesn't Work. This is probably the most read article on the IGDA website. He talked about how crunch mode happened in the industry and did some studies on this, did some reviews on this, did some interviews on this. And we talked about how the game industry is working versus how the science on our research on all this stuff has actually grown up. And it really just came down to we're doing the wrong things. It's just he was looking at the EA spouse scenario and what happened in reality, and was just realizing just how it really didn't work out the way that it really wanted to work out. EA spouse story or EA the human story. It's also still public. You can go into the LiveJournal. It wasn't WordPress. It was LiveJournal. You can go to our LiveJournal page and still read it. It's still available for you. You want to see what happened there. What was that?
So that's kind of wild. I didn't think LiveJournal was still.
Seriously, that website is still up at all. It's kind of surprising. It's like I was hosting on GeoCities,
Wasn't it MSN?
But then the last thing inside of here, IGDA Developer Satisfaction Survey. Like I said, these come out every 2 years. Heavily suggest paying attention to these when they do come out. There's a lot of good information that is inside of here that you can really gauge a lot of things inside of the industry with. And it's just a good spot of seeing different things going on. So we have the 2004 Developer Satisfaction Survey right here. Let me go into that report. It's actually the 2023 Developer Satisfaction Survey, just got published in 2004. We can see different things that are involved in this. You have the demographics inside of the game industry, crediting policies, employment relations, profile of employees. We have, let's see here, company team size, salary averages, roles of people inside of the industry. One thing I actually really like looking at in the demographic section is age. This is one of the things I really like, and it's not just because I'm an old man, but just because when I've been looking at this over time, this peak has been moving back. It hasn't it used to be a slope where it was the 18 to 27 was just straight down from there. And it was just people were just leaving the game industry at that point. But the fact that the peak is starting to move back means people are staying in the industry longer. People are burning out less, and they're actually like working with each other, having longer careers in the game industry, which is great compared to what it used to be, where like it was legitimately like a flat slope down. And these ranges were smaller before as well. I think it was like 18 to 20, and then it was like 20 to 25 or something like that. Like the ranges were smaller. They expanded the ranges out on this as well because people are living in the industry, or like working in the industry a lot longer. Man, the fact that like 45 to 57 is 11% of the industry is crazy that number has gotten so high. People are actually staying in the industry. That's awesome. That's actually a career, not just a job. All right, so that's what I wanted to talk about as far as lecture today is concerned. Alpha Sprint Planning, we're going to be doing that on Monday, right? That's not something we're doing today. You still have to finish your pre-production before we can move into that. So we're going to do our pre-production, get all that stuff solid before we move forward. But yeah, so like this, yeah, I'll go through with all of this with you on Monday, right? We don't have to pay attention to this one right now. But these are our sprint goals for the Alpha milestone. Planning all that with each other. The thing we really need to pay attention to right now is going back to the previous lecture. Step back into that and see where are we. Tab files, my lectures. What we're paying attention to is this again. Oh, come on, I killed it again just from exiting full screen. There we go. Yeah, so this is what we're paying attention. Complete your pre-production milestone, right? Make sure your game design document is solid. Make sure your overview, the comparable products that are in production, the scope and mechanics are fully documented inside of there. But then also product backlog. In fact, this is probably the more important of the two. But like I'm not discounting the use of the design document, but like if you want to have more focus on one versus the other, the product backlog is one that you're going to want to spend more focus on at this point, because we're going to be taking those user stories from the product backlog and using them for sprint planning in the future, right? Basically just grabbing user stories, moving into the sprint board and estimating them and assigning them to people. So get your product backlog into a point where you can comfortably do that, right? That you can actually use that for getting going forward. All this is due Sunday at 11:59 p.m. So on Monday, we can all do our sprint planning with each other and then be working on our sprints all week, right? And just get our 20 hours worth of work on our milestone done during that week. Do you have any questions from you about any of this stuff? It is a little bit early. Usually this section takes me a little bit longer to go through. It's about 11:40 right now, which means we're 20 minutes early for lunch. I'm not going to make us sit around for 20 minutes if there's nothing else to talk about. But I'll open up for questions if anyone has any questions for me.
So you used to work for EA?
I used to work for you, yeah.
Okay, so like how big was your team, like was that probably like 100 something?
That's an interesting question, and it's not as easy to answer as you might think, actually, because you at EA we didn't work with the entire team every day. EA definitely had the team structure where you have your like we have EA up here, right? But then we have going down in here, we have the Tiburon and EA LA and EA. I'm trying to remember what other studios were. There's EA California, or I mean EA Canada in there as well. There's some in Europe as well. Right, you have those different places, and then Tiburon was broken apart into like the product teams first. So you had like the Madden team, and then you had the NCAA team. And then you had underneath that, you had the Tiger Woods team, right? You have all them. And then the Madden team is also broken down into the tools team, the core development team, the QA team, the art team, right? So it's like broken all in that. And then even that, then the core team is broken down into the sections of so like each one down here was like 10 people. But then you have the whole pyramid to go up. So like how big was the team? Yeah, like I said, it's harder to answer than I would like to say.
They always see these games with the credits. So they can like.
That's one of the reasons why, right? Because the credits contain this entire tree all the way down to the product level, right? So it's going to contain everyone under it and everyone in the pyramid above it, and also any other studio that you're cooperating with, right? So like if we even though like we're at Tiburon, if we cooperated with EA Canada for a tool, then all of EA Canada gets credited as well, right? So like that's why the credits get like super long.
Second question.
Yeah.
Since you were, so what type of work did you get, like, did you work on, like,
While I was there, I worked on Madden, NCAA, NASCAR Thunder, Command and Conquer Generals, Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle Earth.
Not like
The other day I was at the game store and I saw a guidebook for Sims Online and I was like, it was only
Sims
$10.
Online.
Yeah, I was like, I don't
I
know.
had Sims Online for I think 6 weeks, and it was post launch. So like I'm not credited on that one.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say like something like.
But I mean, the guidebook is like, I don't even know. You can't even use it anymore. So it's like, I don't even.
Oh, you can't use it. Servers are dope. All right, hold on. Let me get back to you.
Yeah, like the complexity of the task, when you had like so many people, or you have working on a big thing, or was it like a small thing? Like, did you have to use like these planning cards to, like, oh, it's gonna take 3 hours?
On the team level, but with that, we didn't do planning poker or scrum at that era because of the time I was there. Like I said, I was at EA from 2002 to 2005, and while I was and Scrum got published in 2010, I think. Right, so like it didn't even exist yet at that point. Like we were Waterfall. So like it was definitely a lot more like, here's your task of to-dos, get it to me by the end of the week while I was working there. It has shifted significantly since then.
You said you know a lot of people that like throughout the years working in the industry, they couldn't ever disclose what they worked on.
Yeah.
How does that affect, like, if you're gonna get a job somewhere else, how can you properly build a resume?
That is interesting. I've actually run into that more here at Full Sail than I did on the industry, but it definitely happens. Where if you can't disclose what you worked on, you try to disclose as much as you can without having any issues. Like I had one employee that worked in the military on top secret projects. So like all he can say is like, I worked at the military in the Navy as a programmer for this amount of time. That's all I can tell you, right? Like, and that was not what his resume was. It'd be like during this time. And like when it comes up to like, prerequisite to be like, you have experience with this library or API, he just say like, yes or no, you have experience with the libraries, but he can't say when he got that experience. Like a lot of times, or like what he got that experience doing, which would be like, yeah, I've been working in C# for the last 20 years. Like, okay, that's all you know, right? There's not anything else you can do. So like, it can cause a weird things that happen during like compliance and during interviews, but you can still say that you worked on something and like what the general aspect of that job is.
I think you're showing off more skills and like what specific experience.
Yeah, exactly. It's the skills, not the actual project at that point. All right, let's go ahead and break for lunch then. And you all will have lab at 1 o'clock up in Blackmore. I will see you all on Monday again for our next lecture.
I do have one question about.
All right,
Sure.
thank you.
So the feedback that you gave was.
Yeah.
The feedback was.
Correct. To get attributes file, that's where you define like the get large file support.
Yeah.
Oh, you do have one. Okay.
We did have one bit.
Is it blank? Yeah, so there's basically nothing in it, right? So like, maybe I commented wrong on that one. Then. Like, so you have to get attributes, but it doesn't have the file information in it yet. What I'm talking about with get attributes, and I could share this one with the class. Like my default get attributes file for Unity projects is let me see if I can find it here. Let's see here, midterm examples, reference files, game base. There we go. It did it again. All right, there we go. So this is what my default get attributes file looks like for me on Unity projects. And it's basically just telling what type of files should use get LFS filtering for its upload. It's basically the type of files that are most commonly could get above 50 megabytes. So like things like a Unity package file or an exe or a zip, like those you'd want to use LFS to upload, but you wouldn't want to upload like every text file with LFS, right? You're like, so that's all I'm bringing up on this one, because like these can sometimes cause issues. I don't suggest putting every type of file in here necessarily in some cases. Like I've seen that happen where teams put like every asset file, so they're putting like all the textures and all the animations and everything in there with LFS. And while that makes sense from the Git logic point of view, you're going to run out of bandwidth really quick with your LFS settings, because like GitHub has a default bandwidth of 1 gigabyte for your LFS storage. You run through that very fast, right? So that you don't want to put things inside of there you don't need there. But these are the most common ones I see.
Funny to me too, because GitHub itself has 5 gigabytes, but for the large file storage, I have less space.
So real quick, we got together.
The stuff that needs
An asset
space
package?
has less.
Right? like we bought an asset packet.
Okay.
On Unity Store, and your feedback actually said that we're already over the limit for the.
Well, no, we're,
Well, it wasn't that you're over the limit, it was just watching out to be like, hey, don't let yourself run out of limit. You're like,
Didn't you say it was like 500? And otherwise we were like at a gig already?
No, we're not.
no, that's saying for the,
1.2 gig.
We're at
5
like
gig
40
is the
maybe.
limit for kids.
Oh,
And I think we're at like 40. Like 40 megabytes.
yeah, like when you make your build, how big is the build? And I'll go into that in, I think, next lecture, actually, I'll talk to you about how you can find like where all your assets are going and like how much space you're actually using, because when Unity makes its build, it doesn't take literally the whole assets folder and put it in there. It grabs ones that are being used
okay.
and compresses them in a lot of ways and
That's
only
gonna
puts
be my
them in
question.
there. Yeah.
It's like we have this entire asset thing
Yeah.
full of like 38 models and stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I do have a little bit of concern on that with some teams, like,
Once we go through, like,
Delete a bunch.
delete and import what we actually need.
right, that's exactly what I was gonna say, like, try to only add the ones you're actively using.
I just
or
imported
can
everything that
load
what we
space,
were going
yeah.
to use specifically for.
Also,
We're
they
gonna
did not
think
say
back.
that any of the wrong.
You're looking
Last
at
year,
it.
but we did.
Do you see my answer?
So.
I did see that, that's what, so is that a joke? Is the team going in that direction, or is
We
that?
are going in that
We did-
direction.
we did-
like-
We were
I,
on,
but I mean, that was also kind of a joke, though, that was a
That was full on
yeah.
ChatGPT.
Yeah.
your description of what, of that game was pretty much our game minus
Yeah.
Mecha Hitler.
No, you
And I was like, well, we need a boss, I'm putting a mustache on this mech.
Put it in Mecha Hitler.
You said
Yeah,
the first
yeah, so I
thing
threw in
you-
the Duke Nukem 3D Mecha Hitler,
Yeah,
not
that
3D, that
was
was the first Duke. Or first Wolfenstein.
But yeah, no,
Mecha
you,
Hitler.
you got whatever was in your head, and you just like nailed our game on the spot. I even looked at him like.
Yeah, I had like put that mech in there because I was gonna make a boss fight, and no matter how hard I've tried to delete it, it's been on somebody, so it just stays in the goddamn repo. And then you said that, I was like, we're using the mech. He can't go away anyway.
Well, the theme for Mecha Hitler and Wolfenstein though is like you fight Hitler twice. Like, you fight him like mid game and you kill him. That's one of like the most like gratuitous death cams in video games is the Hitler dying in Wolfenstein. And the only thing that's left is his head, and that's why he's Mecha Hitler later, because that's all that's left of him.
Well, that's essentially.
You're getting into.
We're just at the
Yeah.
back end of that. You don't, he already had a fight.
He died in normal World War II,
Okay, yeah.
and now.
Okay, hold on. We're getting into, some, what's it called, like,
Spoilers?
Security level.
Oh,
four stuff.
yeah.
Maybe not, like the teachers got
Alright.
steal the game.
Let me stop the recording.